Good evening. I'd like to welcome you all to the October 22nd, 2008 public hearing of the Board of Architectural Review. We appreciate everyone in attendance this evening. My name is Derek Wingfield. I'm the chair, and I would like the rest of the board members to introduce themselves, please.
Thank you. Monica Sumner.
Nathan Billings.
Greg Hosfield.
Thank you very much. The board was established by the zoning ordinance in 1958, and our first historic district was Gratz Park, and we now have a total of 14 historic districts. The board, which is appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the Urban County Council, is part of the Division of Historic Preservation. The Preservation Office maintains a full-time staff to assist you with your projects. The board encourages and recommends that applicants use them as a resource. The Preservation Office is located at 101 East Vine Street in room 220. It is our procedure to consider applications in the order in which they are listed on our agenda. In each case, we'll have a presentation by the staff and hear any additional comments from the applicant. The board will then ask questions or make comments regarding the application and then hear any comments from any interested parties in the audience. The chair will then ask the board members to enter a motion. If you wish to address the board this evening, please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the public record. We'd also ask that you please write your name on the sign-in sheet by the door so that all the information may be recorded correctly. This evening we have quite a few applications that have already been issued certificates of appropriateness. There are certain items that the staff can approve, eliminating the necessity for all applicants to appear before the board. I'll read those quickly into the record. In the South Ashland Central Avenue Historic District, we have 117 South Ashland Avenue, renovate front porch, and 284 South Ashland, replace shutter, exterior, and change exterior light fixtures. In the Aylesford Historic District, we have 266 Clay Avenue, renovate structure, 445 East High Street, remove dying Bradford trees from utility strip, 320 Linden Walk, resurface, repave existing driveway, and at 137 Ransom Avenue, repair, replace basement and storm windows. Oh, there's one more. In Aylesford, 363 Transylvania Park, remove dying tree and renovate front porch. In Belcourt, at 161 West Belcourt, re-roof structure. In Gratz Park, at 216 Market Street, tuck point structure and prepare for painting. 2 in the North Side Historic District, 538 North Broadway, install new wood storm door for front door. And at 489 West 3rd Street, remove dying tree. In 7 Parks, at 500 Arcadia Park, replace existing windows and repair window surrounds. In the South Hill Historic District, at 416, 418 South Mill Street, renovate the structure. And finally, in the Western Suburbs Historic District, we have 2 cases. At 620 West Short Street, change fence line and graveled area. And at 716 West Short Street, replace wood storm door. Again, all these applicants already have their certificates of appropriateness and can begin work. We'll now proceed with the review of certificate of appropriateness applications. And the first one is in the Aylesford Historic District at 332 Lafayette Avenue, install a fence. Is that applicant present? Ma'am, if you'd like to come forward and give us your name and address, please.
I'm Helena Pappas at 332 Lafayette Avenue.
Thank you. Staff is recommending approval is submitted. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
That's good. It doesn't get too much easier than
I
that.
appreciate it.
Does anyone in the audience, does anyone on the board have any questions or comments for the applicant? Anyone in the audience wish to speak to this case? Okay, hearing no comments, the chair to entertain a motion, please.
Mr. Chair, with respect to case number 109-80332 for 332 Lafayette Avenue, I would recommend that the board approve as submitted.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Hosfield. Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Next case this evening is in the South Hill Historic District at 416, 418 South Mill Street. Renovate structure and site. Is that applicant present?
The applicant's not present, but has received a staff report.
Mr. Giannakis, do you know if has there been any feedback? Do you know if they're in agreement with that?
I didn't hear any, no feedback.
The staff is writing approval with two relatively minor conditions. If it's the board's pleasure, we could go ahead and act on this case. I don't think there's anything that would hinder the applicant, and always, if there was an issue, they could come back at the next meeting to talk to us about it. We would certainly entertain a motion. Was there anyone in the audience here who wished to speak to 416, 418 South Mill Street? Okay. Certainly entertain a motion.
I could ask, because the applicant's not here, but there are two conditions that are separate from the application. If we approve as submitted, let's just do, I just move we table the end to see if they come back. If not, we can then address it. I hate to do something if they're not here and they are running late or something.
That's fine. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll come back to this a little bit later this evening. Pardon me while I flip pages here. Next case is in the Belcourt Historic District at 147 Forest Avenue. Remove trees and landscape site. Is that applicant present? You would give us your name and address, please.
Victoria Sword, 147 Forest Avenue.
Thank you very much. Have you had a chance to read the staff's findings and recommendations?
Yes, I have. Go ahead.
Are you in agreement with them?
What I guess my question is, I know Lucian, the landscape architect that we have from Hinkle, Denmark, said that you had received the plan, our overall plan, for the landscaping for the entire backyard and the side. What's in question, apparently, is the walnut tree you guys are okay with removing, but then the one that was in question was the tulip poplar. And there is some ice storm damage from years ago on that. What Mr. Query had noted was that it could go any time, probably not soon, but it could, there was some damage. It does set right next to a new addition that we've done, a very well-appointed addition that Graham Pohl designed. The tulip poplar that we want to replace, approximately the spread of that is 706 square feet. The things that we were wanting to replace it with and to plant along the side there would replace 6,908 areas or square feet of spread there. So a substantial increase in what we're trying to provide. And the side area that we're trying to remove that tree from, the house was vacant for 2 years. It's become very overgrown. It's not attractive at all now. What we're trying to do is really make that side lot that you see as you drive into Belcourt much more attractive and appealing, and make it much more cohesive with the rest of the house.
I think it might be appropriate and to the benefit of everyone if we go and have the staff give us the full presentation. Sure. And then if that's okay with you, we'll be right back.
Yeah.
Back with you.
Okay.
If the staff would.
Yes, a couple of things, though, relative to your possibility of sounding some items. Do you want to complete that? Because there's one you may not know to be aware of, because there's some changes in the staff findings and recommendations. So are you ready to start into hearing all of the cases, or do you want to?
Well, since we've already started discussing this one, we'll go ahead and do it, and then maybe we'll go ahead and try to sound through the rest.
Betty Kerr with Historic Preservation. And might I ask if the applicant is in agreement, are you in agreement with all the staff report with the exception of the tulip poplar? Mm-hmm. Then would it be the board's pleasure to only hear about the issues relative to the tulip poplar?
I'm entirely comfortable with that.
Okay. With that in mind, let's do a quick overview of the property. You are familiar probably with this property at 147 Forest Avenue. And I think you're aware the applicant has previously gotten certificates of appropriateness to do renovation of the existing house and new construction as well, which you'll see the results of in some of this. This is the bur oak tree, which is there at the front corner, which is remaining, no question about this. This is the side view with Skane Alley just to the edge of the left of the picture, and it includes both the walnut and the tulip poplar that are being discussed in this application. And the walnut is the one closer to the photograph with the tulip poplar further back. I have it right, I believe. And there's another view showing particularly both, but the tulip poplar as well, and then the new addition area as well. Again, along Skane, here's the new addition and the tree. And then this is the rear with what had previously been approved about driveway apron and so forth, and then all that other that is proposed today you've seen reflected in the plan that the applicant's in agreement with the staff recommendations on that. So I think the main thing would be just to discuss briefly the tulip poplar. The urban forester Tim Query, did visit the site, as has been mentioned by the applicant, and look at the two trees that are requested for removal that are greater than 10 inches in diameter. There are several trees with less than 10-inch diameter trunks that are being removed and need no review, but are happening as part of this project. Tim Query's take on the walnut tree you saw in the staff report, and reflecting the staff's concurrence with the applicant's request to remove that tree, both because of the proximity to the house steps out, the historic mass of the house steps out somewhat in the proximity of that walnut. The tulip poplar is in a section of it that is not part of where the main mass steps out, so it has a little bit more distance from the main mass. One of the issues, of course, that the guidelines asked to be addressed in any consideration of tree removal, health of the tree. Obviously, Tim did find that the tulip poplar is in decent health. We have some trees, perhaps, of mature big mass that didn't have damage in the ice storm, but so many did. And they're recouping as they best can, and many of them can have a long productive number of years. But in the instance of this tulip poplar, one of the things, the streetscape and this corner location of this house is a very significant house in the neighborhood of Belcourt, is not only the presence, by being such a mature tree, you get that canopy and the mass, the vertical height and the presence that comes along that takes so many years to return when you do even substantial new planting. Trees that would have that big, tall canopy. So, unfortunately, in all of our historic areas, we seem to be losing that big vertical canopy with that really substantial presence. And so, from the guidelines perspective, I think it's very important that we protect those and retain them when at all possible. And hence you see the staff's recommendation for the denial of the removal of the tulip poplar, and in keeping with what the urban forester suggested, that it perhaps be pruned back some to facilitate both sunlight for the new plantings that are to come along, and perhaps help it be a little more resistant to some storm issues perhaps in the coming future. And so that's the recommendation, to deny the removal of the tulip poplar in accordance with the guidelines.
Thank you, Ms. Kerr.
Thank you.
Ma'am, if you'd like to come back forward. Before we get, we'll have the, I'm sorry?
Do I come stay
Oh,
here?
no, you can stay.
Okay.
You can come up here if you want.
It's okay, I'm fine.
There's a little portable microphone.
This is first time for me, so.
No, you're fine. I guess we'll go ahead and have see if the board has any comments or questions for you.
Okay.
Ms. Sumner?
I have no questions.
Mr. Billings?
What's the purpose of removing the tulip poplar?
It is right next to the new addition. I mean, it was a voluntary, this tree was not planted by any of the previous owners. I mean, they stated they think it's just a tree that just kind of ended up there. And it is right next to the addition. And any damage, I mean, my architect and Mr. Query I wish that would have been included, that there is some ice storm damage. My in-laws that had lived in the house prior, were concerned about that after the ice storm. They both passed away before that was able to be, taken care of. It's grown back some, but it's kind of a twisted tree. If we prune it back, I understand it will help some, but like I said, what we're proposing is to replace it. I understand it takes some time for those to mature to that degree, but we're proposing several new, very, healthy trees that will provide 10 times or more the canopy that tree provides, and it sits right next to the addition. I know that, he said, well, it could go, now it could go later. Honestly, after the work we've put in on this house, that falling on my addition anytime is pretty frightening to me.
How far, it looks like there's going to be some dogwoods planted between Skane and the house, maybe 5 or, let's see, it looks like 5, is that correct? How far back do they go in relation to where the Walnuts now stands?
I have the plans for the entire land. I don't know if you guys have that.
We do.
We have I just
To show that. I'm sorry. I
trying to
don't
figure out
know
the
that.
picture
We'll see if Mr. Ship can put
where
those
the
up on-
walnut tree is on here. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Oh, the walnut tree?
Because they're not identified on the landscaping plans.
Oh,
They've been
okay.
removed, so I'm trying to figure out what the location is currently as compared to what you all proposed to put in.
The
We're
walnut
putting
and
the plan up on Elmo in just a second here, so you can,
the walnut and the tulip poplar are sitting right next to each other. The tulip poplar is the one closest to the addition. Apparently, they're okay with the walnut being removed because of the proximity to the house.
I'm trying to get Elmo up.
That takes a second.
There we go.
Oh, okay. Is that your drawing?
yeah,
No, it's compliments of Mr. Hosfield.
Okay. Oh, okay, I see. Okay, I have no further questions.
Mr. Hosfield?
I have no further questions.
I'm usually quite a tree hugger. I do believe in this particular case, though. I find that the proximity of the tulip poplar to both the historic mass and the new addition to be problematic, and personally, I think that the proposal would be within the guidelines, and that it would be a safer environment and be more complementary to this particular site in the district to have both trees removed and to have the new plantings installed. Let's see if anyone in the audience has any comments or questions regarding this case this evening. Ma'am, did you have anything else? Okay. Well, let's see if anyone's ready to make a motion.
oh, I'll note that. Staff would note one thing that is not tied to the discussion of the tulip poplar, and that is that the landscape architect today sent in an adjustment to the plan that is also in agreement with what the staff recommendation reflects, but it is to switch those ivory silk lilacs into, what were they, red maples, Randy? I think Randy's got the plan. The adjusted piece. You might put that up. I'm sorry, thank you. Let me turn this off so you can see. So this would in no way conflict with what the staff's recommendation reflects, but it is an adjustment to the plan that you had in your packet from previous, just for a clarification and an update.
Thank you, Ms. Carr. And I think Mr. Billings is contemplating
So which plan is being submitted?
the revised plan. the tree switch.
Mr. Chairman, with respect to case number 07280-147-B at 147 Forest Avenue, I recommend that the application for COA be approved as recommended approval of the landscape plan by the staff with the supplement provided by landscape architect Hinkle Denmark this afternoon, as well as the removal of the walnut tree and pruning of the tulip poplar tree in accordance with the recommendations by the LFUCG urban forester.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. Is there a second? Okay, I'm not hearing a second, so the motion fails. Is there another motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion in case number 07280-147B that we accept it with the recommendations of the staff, approval of the landscape plan as submitted this afternoon, as well as staff recommendation approval of removing the walnut tree, as well as the poplar tree.
Thank you for the motion. I believe
I believe I said two different things.
that's okay. I think you're pretty much recommending as submitted this afternoon, so with the removal of the walnut tree and the tulip poplar. Because your motion is suggesting something that staff has pointed out in the findings as not being in agreement with the guidelines, I believe you'll have to come up with an alternate finding as to why the proposal meets the guidelines.
That's the one I was looking for. I would justify that recommendation with guideline 13-4. Trees with trunks greater than 10 inches in diameter should not be removed unless diseased or unsafe, deemed unsafe per our conversation today in this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Hosfield. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Sumner. Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
That would be 3 to 1. The motion does carry, though. Thank you very much. Bear me with you just a second here. Let me see if I can flip through the cases quickly.
Well, there's a little update, too, when you're ready.
Oh, go ahead.
That now?
While I'm flipping.
On your docket number 5, 111 to 113 Salem Avenue, the applicant, this is to change the fence design, the applicant phoned this afternoon that she is ill and she's requested a postponement of this being heard until the November 12th docket. And then there's one other thing, but you may want to act on that.
Okay. If there's a motion to postpone 111, 113 Salem Avenue to the 12th November meeting, 2008, certainly entertain it.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
The only other item to note, there's a slight change on in terms of the staff report and recommendations. 640 West Short Street, number 6 on your docket, to change the fence location and the height. Since the time the staff report was written, a member of the staff and I made a nighttime weekend visit to the site, and nobody came out and shot us. We appreciate that, if the property owner's here. And looked at the situation relative to the lighting of the gas station in the true dark of the night, and would suggest changing a bit of our staff report and recommendation to essentially, because of the conditions of that commercial enterprise that they are near, change the recommendation to be approval as submitted.
Is that applicant present for 640 West Short Street? Sir, if you would come forward and give us your name and address, please.
My name is Kirk Hall at 640 West Short Street.
Just heard the revised findings and recommendations. Basically, approval is submitted. Is that okay with you?
Yes, and I appreciate you snooping around the house.
Does anyone on the board have any comments or questions for the applicant? Anyone in the audience wish to speak to this case? All right, hearing no comments, the chair to entertain a motion, please.
Mr. Chairman, relative to case number 1717064-F, 640 West Short Street in the Western Suburb Historic District, I will make a motion to approve the application as submitted.
Thank you, Ms. Sumner. Is there- oh,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
No, that's it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for everyone's patience. We'll go back to 101 Hampton Court in the North Side Historic District. Need to note before we hear the case that the board needs to make a ruling as to whether there is sufficient new evidence to rehear this application, since the board denied a similar request at the 24 September 2008 meeting, and by ordinance, we are not permitted to rehear the same application within 12 months of our previously denied application. So certainly entertain any comments the board has.
There is a difference in the substance of the submittal. I mean, on the last submittal, it was an 8-foot tall fence with no screening.
Give me just a second.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I've reviewed this in the documents from our hearing on the 24th, and I believe that it's sufficient new evidence with respect to the plan design for the fence, insofar as the height of the fence and the materials used at each height section, such that it would be a new application and not a application for rehearing on a prior one. And that therefore we have the ability under the ordinance to consider this new application.
Mr. Billings, might I consider that a motion?
Yes. Please do.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second to the motion? I'll second the motion. Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor of the motion? Go ahead.
I would bring up the point that I believe the intent or the problem that was had with the fence before was not what it was made of, but the height of the fence at the rear of the property. And in this application, it appears that it is a different height. Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly or incorrectly?
I believe the difference of the I believe I agree with Mr. Julian. I believe there is a difference, that this application is substantially different enough from the previous application, and that the previous application was a solid 6-foot tall or 8-foot tall vertical height, and this new submittal is a 6-foot tall solid mass with 2 feet of the metal transparent grill work on top of the solid 6-foot.
So a total of 8 feet.
A total of 8 feet still, yes.
So that sounds like it still has the original fence height issue that was presented in the original request.
Both the proposals are, as you say, for an 8-foot. There are differences in the design of what's being put forward, in the staff's opinion.
I just wanted to clarify that that is what I saw. Thank you.
Certainly. Any other comments or discussions on the motion? Okay. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
It's a 3-to-1 vote. Motion carries. So we will hear the case.
Are we going
Sir,
to
if
hear
you
it now,
would-
or are we going to go through the... We've kind of gotten out of your typical procedure.
We should present?
Probably go ahead and present just to make sure that everyone's on the same page.
Okay.
Give the staff report and then have the applicant come up.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll be to you very quickly.
This is the project site. This is the area that was in question earlier, and the board, if you recall, for a 6-foot privacy fence, said if indeed they make the top 2 feet more transparent, approved the 6-foot with 4 foot for this area, and also approved a 6-foot high privacy fence down the north side of this property and in the rear yard, the south side. But disapproved an 8-foot high fence along Ross Street. At this time, the applicant has submitted a design, and it's the one at the bottom of the drawing there. The drawing at the top is the design that the staff said they would approve, and the board left it up to the staff, and now this is the same design for the openness of the top 2 feet. So at this time, the applicant is requesting the board grant COA for an 8-foot high fence along the rear property line. The proposed fence would be of wood for the first 6 feet height, supported on posts, be an 8-foot in height, in which would be attached the identical 2-foot high open metal grid panel as described earlier that was approved for, staff approved for wall E. We list the guidelines for your reference. The findings, the proposal to include the rear yard of this property with fence at the rear property line is appropriate within the guidelines, have the manner by which the same is accomplished requires careful consideration. Guideline 13.2 notes new boundary definers should be compatible with principal structures on the property as well as historic surrounding properties. In addition, new boundary definers should not be visible, dominant, or intrusive as stated in Guideline 13.3. The staff finds that the installation of any style of fencing in excess of 6 feet in height to be incompatible with residential character of the site and the historic district. The proposed 8-foot high fence along the west or rear property line would become a visual dominant element to the site and would be intrusive to the neighborhood. Staff recommends disapproval as submitted.
Thank you, Mr. Ginocchio. Sir, if you would like to come forward now, and if you would please give us your name and address.
Mark Ishmael, Fox Hill Company, 147 East 3rd Street, Lexington.
Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Yeah. We've altered our submittal, and I have 3 points that we'll be making in support of that. Initially, our 2 previous points. Concerning security. What?
I said it's squeaky.
Yeah, concerning security and concerning the other fences on the alley.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, in a substantive matter, we have two primary arguments along with our security argument. One is to be in keeping with the rest of the neighborhood. There are 7 residents that back up against the alley, and of those 7, 5 of them have 7-foot tall fences or above, and they're contained in those packets. The second issue, however, is that other than the initial submittal for this property, which had a design for fences with brick, with metal grill work above, this submittal is exactly the same, and that submittal was approved by the board, and a COA was issued in September 26th. In that second packet I gave you, I have the COA that was issued, the site plan, and drawings for the fence. If you'd turn your attention to the 5th and 6th item on the COA, and you'll see that it allowed for a 6'6" fence to be built. And then item 6, and it says the height of the wall enclosure along the rear property is to be extended by 2 feet with an open metal grill. So, in fact, that fence was approved at 6'6". Extending it 2 feet would make it 8'6". And then the second sentence in item 6 is the 4-foot high wall at the east end of the north property line will be extended by 2 feet with the same grill. Additionally, in item 5, it also states that the north side yard fence will be 17 feet from the front of the structure, which is part of our request also. But we are submitting substantially the same request, in that our fence is a 6-foot tall solid stockade fence with 2 feet of grill above it. And there's, as I can see it, there's nothing in the record that would substantiate a change in the board's administration of this. The change, as I believe that the staff or someone just said, that there's not a problem in the change of materials from wood to brick, so there's no substantive change. And it's my understanding that the requirements of due process would involve, consistent and neutral administration of these rules. So previously, this board has issued this COA, which is effectively asking for what we're asking for in this submittal. And you've seen the other fences with the property. The contention there is, the staff's finding is no fence in excess of 6 feet is consistent with a residential neighborhood. And in this neighborhood, 5 of the 7 houses that front this alley would then have fences that are inconsistent, and that doesn't seem to work. The character of this neighborhood is that the nominal average height is closer to 7 feet, and those fences are solid, to that height.
Just a quick, staff, did you get a copy of the applicant's minutes? Okay.
Yeah. Which packet?
What you gave him today? Everything. Just so you know, every time you come, you always want to provide a set for the record. Here.
Thank you very much for providing those over.
Okay.
Let's see if anyone on the board has any comments or questions.
Okay.
Board first, and then the audience. Mr. Hosfield?
I have nothing at this time.
Mr. Billings? Ms. Sumner?
So is the reason for the request for an 8-foot fence due to security concerns?
Yes. The applicant or the resident is a single individual. She's female. There's a, last time we didn't bring it this time, she had a substantial record from LFUCG police about the incident of police activity in the neighborhood. And previously, this fence was designed to be 8 foot, and it was designed at that time also for security reasons, and the reasons are the same. And so what we've done is we've changed our application. Instead of a solid 8 foot, wood stockade fence, we'd like this 6 foot fence with the 2 foot grill on top, and it's for security and in keeping with the initial application.
Thank you.
Okay.
I find your arguments compelling. I believe that I was lucky enough to be on the board when this application came through the first time, and I remember we spent a great deal of attention on discussing the fence
Okay.
and the rest of the site work. And I concur with you that this is basically a material change from masonry to wood.
Correct.
With still maintaining the transparency above that. And I believe that your revised application does meet the guidelines because of what you've said, and I don't think that the break in the solid mass with the transparency on top is either visually dominant or intrusive to the site, and it's quite complementary to the structure in the district.
Particularly on the alley. This will be the most articulate, well-made fence on the alley, actually. And the grill work will, be a plus for the alley.
Does anyone in the audience wish to speak to this case? Yes, sir. If you'd like to come forward and give us your name and address, please.
My name's Robert Sanders, 424 West 3rd. I'm in the landscape business, and Candace Coleman asked me to look at their problem in the back with the fences, and we studied it and looked at it, and also come to the realization that for security, now, that, my friends, would be a good place to go do a nighttime visit, but I'd be careful because you would get shot over there. But that is truly a place. She has an elevated porch. When you walk out her new lovely addition, you're sitting up high, and an 8-foot fence would be very appropriate for that. And then she's going to do some landscaping to help soften it. Secondly, if you're on Hampton Court driving through, you will never, unless you're on a moped, you're never going to be able to take your eye off to look up the one little section that you may be able to get a peek at the fence. The only place it'll be seen is if you're an invited guest or on Ross Avenue. And then again, I doubt you ought to be at Ross Avenue unless you're trying to get a little sack or something. So we're not going there. So I really feel that listening to all this, it's really good that y'all have come to, seems like, conclusion that you're going to let her have an 8-foot fence. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Does anyone else in the audience? Yes, sir. If you would please come forward and give us your name and address.
I'm Bill Rambicure, 427 West 3rd Street. I'm a neighbor, friend of Candace's, and I just wanted to support her application. I think that what she's done with the house and what she's doing with the yard is doing nothing but improving the entire area, and I think she has good cause to be concerned for safety reasons, and I certainly think that she ought to be granted this application. Thank you.
Sir, thank you very much. Would anyone else in the audience like to speak this evening? Does anyone on the board have any further comments or questions regarding this case?
I would like just to add that I appreciate the applicant's attention to detail in designing a fence that is attractive.
Thank you, Ms. Sumner. All right. If there are no further comments or questions, the chair would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, in regard to case number 087300101-E, 101 Hampton Court, I would like to make a motion that we accept the applicant's request to construct an 8-foot fence, 6 foot of that fence being solid, 2 foot of that fence being of metal grate as submitted, noting guidelines 13.2 and 3. I do not feel that this fence is visually dominant or would be intrusive, et cetera. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Seminator. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. Is there any, pardon me, is there any discussion of the motion?
Mr. Chairman, with respect to this case number, in addition to the verbiage in the motion, I think that the fence as submitted is in accordance with guidelines 12.1 and that it continues to maintain significant historic site elements. 12.2 and that the new site elements are compatible with historic properties, and with the fence that's currently there being a 7-foot solid wood fence, that guideline 12.5 that the site elements are not visually dominant, especially with how the fence will be tiered from the front part of the property back towards the alleyway. With respect to guideline 13.1, 13.2, and 13.3 as well, and specifically that the additional pictures and reference of the fences along the alleyway are a significant help to the board in helping us to see the relation of the proposed fence to neighboring properties, and I wish that more applicants would do that up front instead of us trying to have to guess what is or what isn't there. That's a significant help, at least to me as a board member.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Pardon me. Our next case this evening is in the North Side Historic District at 431 Fayette Park. Replace addition, construct 2 garages, renovate structure, install brick fence, and retaining wall. Is that applicant present?
My name is Lynn Pettigo with Pettigo Design. I'm at 347 South Upper Street.
Thank you very much. Have you had an opportunity to read the staff's findings and recommendations?
Yes, I have.
Are you in agreement with them?
No.
Okay. We will, it's all right with you, we'll go ahead and
Get
have
through.
the...
Yeah, we'll wait.
Okay, thank you. If staff would give the presentation, please.
Yes, the property at 431 Fayette Park has several requests before you today, as I know you are aware. I'm looking at your materials. The property is on the north side of Fayette Park, kind of midway down the stretch, and this is showing the area where the artwork is proposed. We don't have any details submitted of all about that artwork and how it would be attached to the building and so forth, but that is the vicinity to the left of that 1/1 window and the culmination of that arch where they're proposing the artwork. This is the front lawn area that is where the proposed retaining wall is to be placed, and I'll give you details about that in a little bit, but it is to sit back slightly off the sidewalk and go around the 3 sides. Both the sidewalk face the property and then up the 2 sides running into the land bank as proposed. The driveway area, as you can see, currently has solid paved cross driveway up to a point and then turns into planting strips. This is the vicinity of where the porte cochere is proposed, coming off of what is a proposed new porch. And this is the rear yard where one of the 2 garages proposed would be built. It would be abutting pretty much, not literally, but in proximity to the rear property line the one garage that will be directly in line with the main house, and then the other garage would be off to the left of this image. This is looking back at the rear, obviously, of the house. This is the screened-in porch that is proposed to be removed, and the location in which the proposed new addition would occur, as well as the porch and sometime in the future bricked patio out in the back lawn. But the latter piece, that brick patio, is not before you today. And this is looking across at the rear, showing the yard area, more of the porch. And this is the rear yard proper, looking back toward where the garage would be erected. The having the planting strip in the middle of the driveway, by the way, is proposed to be continued in this back portion as you see it here, the concept of which as you see here. And this is the existing garage that is to the left as you've driven up that driveway and really behind the property next door. It is property owned by this property. It was sold off at some time. The end footage, the remaining backyard footage of an adjacent property, and this is the garage that would be proposed to be demolished to allow for the construction of a new garage. It was built probably within the last, I don't know the date, but I'd say the last 20, 25 years, certainly. And this is obviously from the rear property line looking toward the rear elevation of the historic house. Also along in the side yard landscaping of the rear side of the rear yard. The proposal, we've broken it out into various pieces, starting out with the renovation plans, but a quick overview of what they're requesting. I've given you a good bit of that while going through the photographs. Don't think we didn't discuss about the renovations proposed to the structure proper in terms of improvements to existing conditions, such as the re-roofing of the house, the main mass of the house, and which is proposed to be asphalt shingle, dimensional asphalt shingle, and to install and replace a side bay with the copper roof and return the front porch roof to its appropriate pitch. If we need to, after we've looked at the drawings, we can go back to the front porch view to show you there is a ghost apparent relative to the previous roof line that you probably can see in that image, but it is there. We've seen it with an eye to that concept. I think everything else I've mentioned is part of the overview of the photos of the site relative to the general categorizations of what's proposed today. Also included in the renovation plan, we've given a staff-issued certificate of appropriateness to this project to tuck point the historic structure and to clean the stone foundation with appropriate materials. The demolition, the two things, the rear porch, proposal to remove the rear porch I mentioned. Here on the site plan, you'll see oriented. It's hard. Have we got the clicker with the red? You will see. Is this guy live? Yes, he is. The main mass of the house is, of course, here, and then the rear porch is in the back, as you saw in the photographs. The proposed new construction occurs in the place of that, and then coming on out with the porch, open porch area as well. The photographs probably show you that to you better. The one-story porch is about 38 feet wide and 11 feet deep, give or take. We'll talk about the garage demo in a second, tied to the new construction of that garage would probably be the clearest way to handle that. The new addition, if you can change out, Randy, to the elevations of the proposed rear addition. that would go partially in the footprint, take up the footprint of where this existing porch is, and then be a bit larger than that. It's coming. There's lots and lots of drawings, as you all have seen in your packet, with this project, and so getting them organized for Elmo takes a minute or two. This is the proposed new, what would be the rear elevation of the proposed new addition and its porch, as you can see. It has a large hip roof. It's framed 2.5 story, 31 feet in length and 20 feet deep. This is the addition itself, with a ridge height of 39 feet above grade. It'll have an 812 roof pitch, be fiber cement board with a 6-inch reveal, and its roof material will be a dimensional asphalt shingle to match what will be the new shingle roofing on the main mass. It, as you can see, has a indoor-outdoor fireplace, and that's the large chimney rising at the northern wall of the new addition. This is the side elevation, and you can see how the roof line runs up into and joins the roof line of the historic mass. And then, thank you, Randy, and then the new proposed porch ties into that rear addition. The covered porch that is proposed is 28 feet in length, roughly, by about 18 feet deep. It does include that flat deck with a rail, wood rail around it on the roof. And I think that's generally about that. Of course, everyone's aware the board has full plans of all this, so I'm just giving you a brief overview, and certainly will respond if you have questions, either myself and or the applicant. The porte cochere, which is the element you see to the right, thank you, Randy, and that is to be 1 story at the driveway, of course, 12 foot by 18 feet deep. It has square wood columns, wrapped wood columns, and will have a similar design features as is proposed for the porch itself. And as I mentioned in the overview, the proposed patio is in the future, so that's not in your plan today, but it would extend out a paved surface from this proposed porch in concept. Don't have any details about that. The garages, if we could skip over, Randy, to one of the garages. I think I've got first the one that is behind the house, so that'd be the one on the east of the two. I think that's the way I labeled them for Randy. There you go. This is the proposed garage to go near the rear property line on the main parcel. And as you can see, it's a gable-roofed 1.5 story garage. It's 21 feet wide by 22 deep and about 22 feet tall, 21 to 22 feet tall. If I got the right one, let's see, because we're saying in our report that it's got a single door. That's not correct. This one has 2 doors. So let me look at that. Lynn, straighten me up. Have I got, this is the one directly behind the house, correct? Because it's got the porch. Right, the doors face to the west, in essence, correct? Yes. So, so it's a little taller. Yeah, it's a tad taller than it's one that will get built across the way. They both, here's the rear elevation of that one that has the porch opening into the yard space. This rear elevation has a 2-story, becomes a 2-story mass with this dormer that is run all the way across the width of the proposed garage. And so the front has the 2 individual dormers, which you saw with gable roofs above, and then this rear has one continuous gable proposed for the back, creating quite a bit of mass back there. Both garages will have the same cladding and same window systems and so forth. Let's go to the one that's proposed for across the way, which would be the western parcel of this property, if you will. And it's the one that you'll see has a single garage door, but is a 2-car garage, and then the 2 dormers, and as I say, similar cladding, similar architectural features proposed as on the other one. You'll notice that the dormers have for their window surrounds on the second floor fluted, vertically oriented detail, and we'll address that in the findings as just a small design consideration that might be need to be looked at. The two-strip driveways will go to both of these in terms of the site, and this is the rear of the one that's the one-door garage in the western segment. No dormer on the back, as you can see from the side elevation showing that. Now, if we could skip over to the site plan, please, where the brick wall and rear yard footprint are shown, Randy, that would be helpful. Thank you. And if you would just point out the run of where the brick wall is proposed. It starts at the rear elevation of the historic structure and basically goes around the property on both sides and the rear property line. So it starts right, Randy's got it right there, continuing up past where the garage would be built. I think you may have another sheet, Randy, that has the full back end of the yard, but that's okay. I'm sure they understand. There you go. Thank you. Here we go again. Starting at the house, coming up what is the east property line, then going across the rear property line to the north, and extending over and including the parcel where that other garage is proposed, and then coming back to the rectilinear traditional yard line on back down to a line opposite the rear of the main mass of the house. Initially, it was proposed to be a 6-foot brick wall. The applicant has revised that and is now proposing a 5-foot brick wall. It is 1 foot deep, and we don't have design details, but have requested that if the board approves it, be provided, of course, before any construction. On the retaining wall, which now we need the front yard, please, with the, there we go. Mentioned in the photographs approximately where this is to be placed in its proposal to run parallel to the front sidewalk. It stands off the front sidewalk, as I recall, about 18 inches, and then comes and makes the turn and follows on both the east and west elevations up and dies out into the land as it rises. It's proposed to be capped with a stone cap and have a metal handrail, as you see sketched in here. I did mention there's to be, I'm on the site work section, that there's to be a gate put across the driveway, and we don't have details of that, but would request that that be provided as well if the board approves that. We have included the guidelines in the report. There are a number of these as would be pertinent given the complexity of this proposal, but I will continue on to the findings. Let me change over. The renovation plans of the historic mass as proposed are appropriate and within the guidelines, and I've mentioned already there is a ghost demarcation on the house about that change in the roof line from the existing condition to a slightly more pitched roof that is historically and actually documented to have been the case on this structure, so that is appropriate and in accordance with the guidelines. On the demolition, the request to remove the existing screen porch is within the guidelines, as it is not a historic element of the house. It's only about 20 years old. It is in scale and all with the house as it is today, but its removal would not detrimentally affect the structure and is in accordance with the guidelines. On the addition as designed is not within the guidelines. The mass of it and the scale and the overall height of the addition is too large for the structure and for the site in which it's being proposed. The roof form overwhelms the structure. It covers a large portion of the existing rear roof line. It's a big hip roof, and in effect it loses the original profile of the rear roof and the cornice line of the historic mass of the house. The overall volume and relationship of that mass to the historic house is really just kind of overwhelming relative to the guidelines and and I think it's possible, certainly, to put an addition on this house if that is desired, but this one is, in the manner in which is proposed, contradicts the intent of the guidelines. The one-story covered porch that is proposed and its porte-cochere is within the guidelines as designed, and I've noted I won't enumerate them, but the guidelines are noted that they do comply with, keeping in mind that that is a proposal to attach to something that is not within the guidelines. So you kind of have to put all that together in your considerations, obviously, as you so well do. The garages, the proposal to construct the two outbuildings or garages is within the guidelines. However, the design of the two garages we think needs more consideration. They have that very steeply pitched roof proposed for both of them. They are gable roofs, but they have a 12/12 pitch, and they're very massive over the top of those one-story garage spaces. And so something with more gentle pitch would be more properly scaled, perhaps, and be more in accordance with the other outbuildings that are characteristic of the Fayette Park Historic District. The front dormers on both of them are also somewhat attenuated. It responds to the fact of that 12/12 pitch and results in sort of further problems relative to the guidelines, making everything exceedingly vertically oriented in its orientation or its design aspect, again, kind of overwhelming the volume of what's below it and the scale of what's below it. The dormer that's the big, long running dormer that's on the back of the one directly behind the house is also very large, and it comes too far out to the edges. More roof should come on down on either side of that dormer, so the dormer should be smallened in its width, in addition to addressing the roof pitch problems. And in order to be in any way in accordance with the guidelines. So the two garages as currently proposed, is the staff's findings are not within the guidelines. And the brick wall, the concept of enclosing the rear yard with a 5-foot brick wall is within the guidelines and appropriate to this site. There are some other brick wall features throughout, not frequently, but they can be found throughout the Fayette Park area and in a bigger picture sense within the north side as well. The site work, the proposal to put a gate across the driveway and do the new concrete work both in the pad and the strip configuration is within the guidelines as noted in the report. And then the retaining wall is not appropriate for the Fayette Park Historic District or this property. The neighborhood has a long history of having rolled front yards without retaining walls, and this is very evident in those streetscape images that you see or when you walk Fayette Park. The use of a retaining wall is inconsistent and would be creating a design element that is not characteristic of the property or certainly the historic area. There is one brick retaining wall in existence in Fayette Park currently. If you as board members visited the site, you probably saw that. It predates the historic district, to my knowledge, and is not really what would be considered in accordance with the guidelines today. I've mentioned about the artwork, that we don't have information on that, and would be addressing predominantly on that subject, how it's attached to the building, if it's appropriate to put it up there at all, that sort of thing, perhaps even more so than the specifics of every nuance of what's proposed of the design for that individual piece. So, the staff recommendations. The staff recommends approval of the following is submitted, and that includes the renovation plans of the historic mass, that being replacing the roof, raising the front porch roof, and the replacing of the metal roof with copper. It includes the demolition of the rear addition as proposed, noting that that is the locale in which this new addition is proposed, and hence the two subjects are related, but not directly necessarily dependent upon each other. The demolition of the garage that's in the western quadrant, the only existing garage at the current time, is within the guidelines and recommended by the staff for approval. The staff on the second segment of this is recommending approval with conditions of the following items. The driveway gate we need the details of that gate design to be, and its installation methods to be submitted to the staff prior to it being ordered up or fabricated and installed. We, as I've mentioned, need the details and information about the artwork. The construction of the brick wall, we need a section. If that brick wall is approved by the board, I would ask that the staff have a section prior to any construction starting on that would be reviewed and approved by staff. The construction of the porte cochere, we need final construction details on that, and noting again that porte cochere and rear porch are following and adjacent to the new addition that's proposed. The rear porch needs the same kind of information as the porte cochere. I've mentioned that. And then just broadly, we need all final details be provided prior to issuance of the COA as enumerated in this report. Staff recommends the tabling of both of the proposed new build garages for further study relative to specifically their roof pitch and dormer sizes, but just to address overall a design that is more appropriately scaled and could be in accordance with the design guidelines. And then the staff recommends disapproval as submitted of the rear addition as designed and the front yard retaining wall. I would note that you as board members have received in your packets letters and materials submitted by some neighbors and such for the record. And that concludes the staff report. Certainly if you have questions, I'm glad to answer. I'm pitch hitting for Amelia, so I hope I've gotten it summed up in a somewhat orderly fashion for you, but be glad to answer questions.
Thank you, Ms. Kerr.
Thank you.
Ms. Pettigo, if you'd like to come back forward, please. And the floor is yours.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to probably address the denial of the design of the rear addition. And I have a picture of a house at 414 Fayette Park that I'll have him put on that it was similar to what this situation is. It was a greenhouse that was all glass, and we renovated and added an addition onto it 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago, was it? Yeah, last year. And its dimensions, the footprint of this particular area that we did a two-story addition on were 17 feet by 30 feet 9 inches. I have the elevations of the rear as it looked when we finished. I don't think that'll fit on there, will it? Will that fit? Maybe. So that being one point, and making my point in regard to the design of the addition of the rear of this house across the street at 431 Fayette Park. I don't see that it's any more obtrusive in my design than this was, and it was approved. So I just want to make that point. Also, in today's environment, most young couples are moving downtown, thank goodness, and they're taking over these beautiful historic homes. In order for them to be habitable for them and their families, needed spaces, additional open space, and master suites are required. This is the reason for this addition, for a family room and a breakfast area, and to renovate a kitchen within the existing structure. On the second floor, a master suite. And we did use part of the space that's inside the house to further that suite. We didn't put it all out there. Anyway, I would probably entertain changing the pitch on the rear, as I've got a drawing of that. If it's absolutely necessary, but I really would rather not have to change the dimensioning of the space, which is, let's see, our design was, hang on a minute, 20 feet by 31 feet 8 inches. The existing screened-in porch was 11 feet 3 by 39 feet. So we are reducing the width and adding an additional 12 feet or 11 feet to the addition of where the porch was. The pitch on the roof that is proposed, that was, I mean, I assume that the roof is the majority of the problem with this regarding mass and scale. That's a 612. If it must be that way, then I would consider doing that. But I'm just pleading my case here. Anybody have any questions?
Well, if you want us to address each...
Oh, you want me to go through the whole thing?
Yeah, maybe so.
Okay. Whichever way you want to do it. I'm going to give you some... I'd like to discuss the retaining wall next. On the design of this retaining wall, I held it off the sidewalk 18 inches or so to provide green space in addition to the design to make it look a little more normal. The height of this retaining wall is 18 inches. And we're not sure why all the lawns or yards in Fayette Park are all designed that way, other than maybe at some point there weren't sidewalks. I don't know. But there is another one in Fayette Park across the street, and it is there, so that would be my argument for the retaining wall. And anything under 2 feet, you are not required to get a building permit for it as well. They have a hard time with this slope in particular. A lot of the yards in there don't slope as such as this one. Nothing will grow on that angle. So it's not set in, I mean, we would be willing to change materials or whatever, just to benefit the maintenance of the yard. We also held the retaining walls in from both side yards. A foot to the, if you're facing the house, it'd be a foot to the right and approximately 4 feet on the left side. Those two subjects being the main subjects that were disapproved. I wanted to discuss those first, and then in regard to the two garages, that's certainly something that we could discuss and change dormer styles and perhaps lower the garage that's the single door garage, lower the pitch on it to be less obtrusive. The carriage house is what we were going for in the design of the garage directly behind the residence, and it was also to be a guest quarters, because future plans for the landscaping would be involving formal gardens and an access that goes directly to that garage. And a little porch design on the garage, a place to grow wisteria and stuff like that, and just enhance the garden effect. We can definitely design the dormers to be a little smaller. They do not meet egress. That would work. I think we could shorten the let's see how to say this, the shed roof, bring it in a little bit. But that space is definitely needed because it's only a 22-foot deep garage in order to get anything accomplished in the upstairs. Again, it all goes back to space. We are fine with, I I don't see anything wrong with the other, talking with staff on the staff level about details and et cetera regarding the gate and the wall and anything else. The homeowner is here as well.
Thank you, Ms. Pettigo. We'll see if the board has any comments or questions for you.
Okay.
Mr. Billings? Okay.
I'm not ready for questions. I think I want to hear from the audience before I begin asking questions.
That's fine. Mr. Osfield?
I don't have any questions at this time.
Sumner?
I have comments more than questions. Would this be the appropriate time?
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Hi. Being new to the board, the specific guideline reference numerals and so on don't always come to mind. So my comments are much less technical relevant to guidelines, but more just visual observance about some of the issues that are at hand here. Regarding the staff's recommendation to disapprove or not allow the addition to be constructed as submitted, I would offer the following thoughts to consider. These old houses are masonry monoliths, but yet they have grace about them. There is such a likable quality about them, even though they are heavy and thick and dense. That's why we love them so much, because there is a real gentleness to their detailing and their scale and their proportion. And so I think that the scale factor of the addition, personally, I have no problem with the dimension of the footprint of it, but really the fact that it seems like it doesn't belong with the house. There's a lack of attention to the gracefulness of such a large piece, because we aren't here to judge whether the family needs that space or not. However, kudos to folks who are staying and moving downtown. And you're right, the residences do need to be modified to meet the way that our families live right now. And I think that the space looks very usable and very appropriate for that. But again, that's not what we're here to judge. We're trying to help folks adhere to these guidelines, to keep our neighborhoods intact and to keep them livable. So I think that there's a simplicity to the addition, which is nice, but some of the graceful qualities and the architectural detailing is lacking. And it may just be the fact that the drawings are simple and perhaps are not as developed as they need to be yet. So I would love to see more developed drawings perhaps to help this along. The fact that the pitch could be changed, you would entertain that concept. I think that's something that could be visited. Going back to the gracefulness of the architecture, I think also the slope or the rolling nature of the lawn contributes to that. There's something very approachable about a property that doesn't have a fence or even though it's only 18 inches high, there's something a bit off-putting about that. Now, if the lawn were not usable, say, for example, there's a 4-foot steep slope and the children can't play in the lawn, et cetera. I could see a strong desire, and in fact, this board has approved such items before. This slope looks very gentle. It looks complementary to the residents, and it's fitting for the neighborhood to stay as such. And it looked like the photo we saw, unless I saw the wrong house, had a lot of ivy growing on the slope. So I'm confused as to the claim that it's not a growable slope, but we're limited to seeing one photograph. Okay. Let's see. And the carriage house notion, again, is great, and But there's more to a carriage house than putting carriage-style garage doors on it. It goes back to the scale and the graceful quality of the architecture.
Right.
So I think ultimately, if we can help you tackle your scale issues, I think we'll make some great improvement here.
I have one thing, may I add? Part of the simplicity of the design of the rear addition is in regard to the fact I'm always, in the past, every time I come down here, which is frequently, have been told that I'm not to mimic history, that it should look like it's added on. And that's where we went with that. And then in the
I
findings, they
appreciate
say they want it to be more compatible, look more like the house and what's going on around it. Well, that's where I'm confused, so.
That is confusing.
Yes.
The notion to not mimic, but to have it fit in, those can be gray areas. But coming down to scale and detail doesn't necessarily mean a mimic. And I don't know that I can articulate that thought better. It's just a touch that it will have or it won't. And I think now we're seeing it's not quite there. But I appreciate that grayness. It's difficult to find that appropriateness.
Before I ask the audience if they have any comments or questions, I would ask if you might entertain coming back next meeting for a conceptual review on this. I think there are a lot of details that we could work out at conceptual review and still have, take action the following meeting.
In regard to the addition and the garages.
And
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
I think that would behoove both the applicant and the board, and also give the staff an opportunity to weigh in an informal setting.
Right.
And I think that certainly, these are public meetings, and certainly any interested parties could comment at that time too. And I think it would overall lead to a much more successful project.
Well, we really want to do this project, and I don't want to have to change the additions except for the scale and pitch. So,
While we're having the other interested parties, if there are any this evening, come forward if you'd like. Sort of suggest you'd like to talk with the owner and see if they might entertain that.
Definitely.
I think that'd be a good idea. And thank you very much. And is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to this case this evening? Yes, sir. If you'd like to, please come forward and give us your name and address.
My name is John Wynn. I live at 435 Fayette Park. It's a duplex. I own it and live downstairs. I'm next door to 431. I guess my main concern is the property line is so fine to put up that brick wall and the porte cochere. I would like to have them come back and show me exactly how this is going to come up on my property. Because there isn't a lot of space between 431 and 433, 435. And my another concern is the green space that this is going to take up. The board, the BOAR, has always been very concerned about taking up green space. And it seems to me this addition and the garages are going to take up, the new garage, going to take up a lot of green space. And the watershed, how's that going to affect the watershed? I'm not against them adding up this, putting an addition on. I can see where they're coming from. But I've still, if you look at some of those pictures, the border of my property line is right along their driveway. And I'm just concerned about, I know they're not going to encroach on my property. I'm not worried about that. But how's the porte cochere going to fit along with the wall? I think we need more detailed drawings as to how this is going to affect my property line. I know, I bet both the owners, and I don't want to stand in their way, but I think we're entitled to know how this is going to affect properties on both sides. I'm president of our little neighborhood association, and I've lived in the park off and on since 1946. In fact, my parents were in the house, lived in the house where the one retaining wall is, and that was put up by the people who they sold it to. And he should have never done it, but there was no approval process in those days. So, if you and one of the comments by the lady that drew up the plans, there's plenty growing in that space that slopes down. There's ivy, and before that there was grass. So the story, the point is that you can't grow anything there. It's not true. So, I mean, I could go on and on, but I think there'll be other times. Okay?
Sir, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sir, what year did your parents sell that house to the people who built the retaining wall?
They bought it in '46. Stephen and Jan bought it. My father died in '81. So I think my mother sold the house. What do you think it was, Cora? 88, 87 or 88.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak to this case? Yes, please come forward.
I'm Ilse Newbury, and I live in 425 Fayette Park. I'm the neighbor on the other side. And I'd like to show some pictures too, and maybe I can make some comments as we go along. I've got a little, this is better. I've got a little PowerPoint with 9 photos that I wanted to show. This is here. I've lived 40 years in Fayette Park, and I just love it there. And please have the first one show. I want you to have a look at these open front yards, because they are just wonderful. It is really a park. The park is in the middle. You can see it, just a few trees there. All houses run roughly the same way from the street, and the backs of the houses are also aligned, which makes a big difference to Fayette Park when they want to build a new addition. Because when you look at some of these in the back now, can I have the next one? You see how all the rears of the houses run in one line? And then we have, on the north side, wonderful green spaces that really make it a park, not just because we have a front park, but every house has a park in its backyard, which is wonderful. And again, I was told that the addition here, for example, all the neighboring green spaces, we can look over there. There is no brick wall there. We see not only our own front yards, we see the back from the neighbors too. Can we have one more? And this is now my backyard and the house 431. So right now it is green too. But can you envisage what happens to my view when we have an addition plus a big patio attached? My view from the kitchen will be another house and no longer a beautiful view. So these are the beautiful green spaces which we have, and which unfortunately no one really mentioned in their review. And we do have a guideline. It says, historic green areas and spaces of a site should be retained, maintained. And I am all very much for this. And I want you to take note of this, because this is what makes it a park and not just buildings. And so I feel very strongly that the new addition for House 431 is very much more important from the viewpoint of survival of Fayette Park. It is not an isolated house at the end of the park, and that is bringing up a remark that the developer mentioned. She said that the system, a few years ago, House 414 added an addition and a solid brick wall. She spoke particularly of that there was a house, right? And I just wanted to say, this was along Vaughan Alley, and it was at the end of the park, right abutting Vaughan Alley, and was not as terrible to the neighborhood as something as that house 431, which, if you look at another sheet that I'm going to show later on, is part of a row of 6 houses that all have the same rear ending and the same front. And so I think this is very important to consider. And by the way, as the new owners explain, the proposed plan to add an addition with a new patio, and he says the proposed plan adds, extends into the green space's rear yard about 38 feet, and that is even without the garages, just the addition and the patio. So our green spaces are also endangered. And as I say, there is the guideline that historic green areas and spaces of a site should be retained, maintained. But the new addition and the porch are not the only items that infringe on the green spaces. There is the extra 2.5 bay, 2-story garage built at the rear end of the green space. I think it's at the rear end. I'm not quite sure right now. But there is another invasion there of green space. So here, this is my worry about the addition. I'll lose a lot of view, and I think we're going to lose a lot of green space. As far as the brick wall is concerned, the historic neighborhood finds fault with some architectural items, especially with the new additions, the house and the porch, plus the garage, but not with the brick wall that surrounds the whole property. The wall begins at the end of the main mass, they say, and by main mass I think it's the old house that is sitting there, and it goes right around the property and ends again at the main house. This takes up green space too. And what worries me is the problem with rainwater flooding. We sometimes get big downpours, and those small retaining green areas in the backyard will be flooded. But another downside that I see is that it will affect the spirit of community which we enjoy. We are all a family. Our houses are aligned. We meet in the park. We talk to one another. But I think a brick wall, 1 foot thick and going around the whole area, is really gives an architectural message of separation rather than of openness. So that is, I think, one of the reasons why I dislike a brick wall. I think it will change. And by the way, there is a brick wall already in this group of houses, but it is short and covers only a very small area on one side. Here, for example, I wanted you to look at some of these additions. This was Googled. This is the house where I have the additions marked in. So you see roughly how much green space is lost. And that white strip at the end, that is the patio that is going to be removed. And you see here with all these houses, you see here 1, 2, 6 houses, all aligned. That's why I wanted to show it. The fronts are aligned and the backs are more or less aligned. But can you imagine if that one jumps way out into the green spaces? It will make a big difference to the park and to this community of 6, to this row of 6 houses that all belong together. The last point I wanted to emphasize again, the loss of green spaces. But it's not just the brick wall, it's the total of additional buildings that covers the green spaces. And it is this lot that will affect Fayette Park immensely. Let's just look at some of the other photos that we have. Can I have one? Oh yeah, there was little room between the lot line and 431. I think I forget what is the legal limit these days, but here I think I have less than 30 inches. So I don't know why that one is in here. Can I have the next one? Yeah, here there was more green space, and I wanted you to see that small brick wall that ends here, that was mentioned, I think, as a precedent. It is just a very old brick wall and very short. And can we have the next one?
Pardon me, what's the address of where that smaller brick wall is?
Mr. Wynn's house, yeah.
It's next door to 430.
Right.
On the other side?
Mr. Wynn's
Yeah,
house,
okay.
the other side, right. And this here, I was just looking out last night from my patio and from my kitchen door. This view will be obliterated with the new addition. I have a wonderful view of these trees and no longer. As I mentioned, house 431 sits in the middle of a row of 6 houses whose rear ends are more or less aligned, and the remainder of the backyard left has lots of green spaces. If this pattern is disturbed with a new addition and large patio and extra garage, green space will be eliminated by more than 38 feet. This also means that a precedent will have been created, and after that, new construction, similar to the ones of 431, will have to be approved. In other words, it adds a precedent to it all. And to me, that means the end of Fayette Park as we presently know it. It will turn into a built-up area, unlike the historic district we know and love.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does anyone else in the audience have any comments or questions? Yes. Please come forward and give us your name and address.
My name's Karen Dupre. I live at 414 Fayette Park. And you have a letter of support from the other owner of the house. I'm also a licensed realtor in the state of Kentucky, and I specialize in the historic home district. Out of 124 agents, I am their historic specialist. And I do live in a great neighborhood. Fayette Park is home, as was West 3rd Street for the last 5 years prior to moving to Fayette Park. The change that I've seen as an agent selling, and actually I did represent the homeowner, that house sat on the market for 2.5 years, as did our house at 414. The change that we've seen downtown, or the new downtown dwellers want to see change. And I certainly understand the difficulty with the neighborhood in Fayette Park opposing it. I see both sides. However, in order to bring some new homeowners, we have to be open to some of the styles and designs that they want to see. And those do include new structures. So unfortunately, I don't oppose this. I do live in the neighborhood. I do have an 8-foot fence around the property. We did have an occurrence last year where a neighbor was upset, a neighbor who does not take care of her house, with the fact that we were doing a renovation, so she painted her wall orange and yellow. In order to not have to see that, we had to spend $10,000 in buying hedges to hide that. So all of us have an issue when we move to this type of neighborhood, and that unfortunately comes with change. I love it, and I wouldn't see myself moving it, but I am a proponent of bringing new neighbors to the downtown. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else in the audience like to? Yes, sir, please. Ma'am.
My name is Pat Odell. I live at 434 Fayette Park. We moved there in January of 1987. We bought the house in 1986 and did renovation from September of 86 till long after we moved there. We reared 3 daughters in our house. We're now raising a granddaughter/daughter who is 11. When she first came to live with us, there were no children in the park. We now have another family with 2. What I'm trying to say is that the children really enjoy the park. You can now in the summertime hear children playing outside. While I don't let them play outside without making sure I can see them, it's nice for them to be able to run across the streets, through the yards, and as Ms. Newberry said, we are a community. We meet and greet in the park. We walk our dogs in the park. The reason I'm speaking, and I cannot address the additions and the work being done in the backyard. I can appreciate people wanting a nice, big, open area. That's not my main concern. My main concern is the retaining wall in the front of the house. I live next door to the one retaining wall that's there. It was actually put up without any consideration to historic guidelines at all, and it was never even presented to the board. At that time, I don't think we had quite as many reviews and people on the lookout, and the members of the park. I didn't really know it was against the rules to have it built, or I would have come and said something, because now all it does is collect leaves and weeds. I think Ms. Meeker has a picture of the park looking down, because this issue came up 2 or 3 years ago when another new resident wanted to put a retaining wall in the front. The yards, the deed restrictions built in the 1800s stated that each house was going to be, I believe, 25 feet from the street. We have had sidewalks since the houses were built. I have a picture of my house that was built in 1889. There's a sidewalk in front of it. All of the yards either slope, some to a more steeper degree than others, but aside from the one illegal restraining wall, the whole look of the park is this flowing green space all down the park. The same deal with the sidewalks leading up to the houses, which was another issue in this other renovation. All of the sidewalks go straight up to the front door of the houses, all down the park and at the end. And for that reason, I thought I really had to come forward and fight this restraining wall, because it will alter the historic look of the park, which has been there since, I believe, 1888. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Yes. Would you give us your name and address, please, sir?
My name is Jerry Leslie, and I'm at the infamous 431 Fayette Park. What I like to, my name is, my background is I'm a civil engineer. I was fortunate enough to be the project manager of Paris Pike Reconstruction, and I'm very well versed in trying to preserve and protect historic districts and historic structures and the integrity of the history, especially of the culture of the bluegrass. That's what really got me interested in this property and the park and the neighborhood. So when we came up with a proposal to do things, everything that I looked at in doing, I took into account the historic integrity of the park. I appreciate the fact, I really appreciate the fact that my neighbors, who have been there for a very long time, some obviously over 50 years, my next door neighbor, and some before him. And my whole intent is to be there as long as they've been there, and to make sure that what has been given to me and passed to me is preserved for everyone else in the future. So everything that I've proposed in my with my understanding meets the design guidelines. I'd like to give this picture. Yes, if you don't mind, which is just the front facade. We talk about green space. Green space is public space. It's not someone's backyard. The proposed fence mimics the 5-foot fence, which is next door. So that was really the whole intention. And in fact, others might say that I should have done an 8-foot fence if I wanted to be a privacy fence. But I understood the issues that my neighbors had, talked with them about having a pure privacy fence, which I would not call a 5-foot fence privacy fence. The reason brick was chosen was because if you look at the material of the neighborhood and the craftsmanship which the original neighborhood was developed on, you would expect that that would have been some type of masonry construction if there was a fence. And so we wanted to match the fence next door. And then there's another privacy fence two houses down, which is actually a 6-foot fence, which we do not want to have a 6-foot fence. And it's wood. We want to have a 5-foot fence. So I see that in no way does not meet the intention of the design guidelines. As far as the green space in the front, as you can see, yes, there's ivy growing on that. I guess there are some that might say that's an invasive species. Ivy, grows everywhere, and it can be a tough thing to maintain. Obviously, the previous owners probably put ivy there because grass really couldn't grow on there, and it's hard to maintain. While it is, if you look at the park, there are rolling front yards, but this one, especially where the ivy's growing, is steeper than the other yards, and therefore it probably obviously eroded. And the intention is to make the retaining wall in scale with the rest of the park, so it doesn't detract from the streetscape that's already there. And I think if we can come to an agreement on color and size of what we get there, you can obviously you can use color and the size of the retaining wall to reduce the hard line that retaining wall would have, and with plantings. But that is, as you can see in this picture, and I don't know what the other picture that you all saw, maybe that didn't give you the perspective of what this picture is. That is much steeper than what you think, and two dimensionals really doesn't do the picture justice and the steepness there. So I just want to end by saying I want this neighborhood to maintain. That's the reason we purchased the house. We want to maintain that integrity, but we also know, and it's also stated in the National Park Service Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation, that historic districts, it's known that historic districts aren't a snapshot in time, that they go, and there's times that it needs to be brought to contemporary, as long as you maintain what made that what got the district nominated, and I don't think anything that we proposed would cause the park to lose its status on the historic registry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir. If you give us your name and address again, please.
Robert Sanders, 424 West 3rd. I've been through the very same thing that Mr. Leslie is getting ready to do with the design project. And I've worked with Martin and Ms. Kerr and Amelia, and it was a long, taxing program. But in the end, it really worked. And a lot of my neighbors were very apprehensive about the scale and scope of what we did and the length of time. But so many of them now have come up and said, wow, we see it coming together, and it does look different. I had the same voiced opposition about the addition is too big, the brick wall, the green space, but we put in some 25-foot tall magnolias and some big 15, 20-foot hollies, and are really doing a nice job, and not one person has voiced any opposition. In fact, they all say this should be a keystone project, and I've known Jerry Leslie for 3 years. We've worked together, and I'm consulting with him on the landscaping, and he's the kind of folks you have to have come down and put the kind of money in these houses that it takes to shore up the basements, to fix the leaking windows, to fix the cracking plaster. To say they can sit there forever in that condition is not going to happen. Now, granted, somebody's view may be altered, but instead of looking 50 feet at a gigantic burrow, maybe they're going to look 20 feet into a 50-year Japanese maple. There's other things, but it has to evolve, and I hope that you can see your way clear in all these people coming forward to give a little consideration of change. Change is not always great, and it's met with resistance, but I can promise you, with the help of Ms. Kerr and her staff at Martin, we love it downtown, and we encourage people. Jerry came to my house before he bought. He said, tell me how you do it. How were you treated? How did you feel? So I said, I told him the truth. There's been some difficult times, but we all worked it out, and I'm very proud to be an owner of a beautiful historic home that's fixed up, and I think Jerry would be very good for Fayette Park. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak? Yes, please.
Chairman Wingfield and members of the BOAR, my name is Wynn Meeker, and I live at 417 Fayette Park, and we do welcome our new neighbors, as we always welcome new neighbors. The great thing about Fayette Park is one generation of children grows up, and now again we're getting new generations of young families and children, and we have all ages and stages, all occupations. Everyone's very busy, but it is a very close neighborhood. It's in a cul-de-sac. We're all part of an extended family. You might not realize that till all hell breaks loose in your life, or when something wonderful happens, the neighbors are always there and get you through it. Right now we have a precious little 3-year-old we're all holding close to our hearts. It's been up in Cincinnati Children's Hospital since March. It's a wonderful neighborhood. It was laid out and started building in 1889. 16 houses. As you go into the park, you just see this vast expanse of green, maybe a little turret sticking up here and a porch column there. Of course, that's not in January when all the leaves are off, but it's a very comfortable and homey setting. It's a very low-key neighborhood, even though we all care about each other. The original deed said the houses had to cost $5,000 and have a slate roof. And 2 of them still have their slate roofs, although it's very difficult to maintain and not have it crack when the man goes up there to repair it. Thank God I don't have one of them. I wanted to talk about the retaining wall. This issue came up on Fayette Park 2 years ago when another new property owner asked for a brick wall in front of the house, and that has never been except for that little one that's down in the corner in the lowest part of the park. There have never been any retaining walls, and I wanted to show you this picture of how it looks when you come in the park. The BOAR 2 years ago did not approve the brick wall, so I would take that as a precedent. It would certainly, this is coming into the park, that's the north side. You can see how the yards all slope down to the street, over into the park, which does not have a curb. And it's just a wonderful sylvan feeling. When you come in there in the hottest day in the summer, it's at least 5 degrees cooler because of all the trees and the green space. I'm sure, Jerry, that you can grow grass on your bank. My bank is as steep as yours. Mine's the first one there. The only thing you have to be careful is you don't get a man with a huge riding lawnmower that skins it. And that happened to me this summer, so I'm going to have to do a little repair. Could you show a couple of those other pictures, Randy? Just showing you more of how the yards all slope down to the street. And yes, grass did grow at 431. For some reason, the people decided they wanted ivy 3 or 4 years ago. That's Mr. Wynn's house with his bank. These are hard to see. I got them off Google. And this is the south side of the street. It's a little bit flatter on the other side of the street. Fayette Park is built on the tallest, what do they call it, highest topography in the north side, and it slopes down into the park, and you don't realize there's much of a slope till there's ice and snow in the street. And I can remember trying to get the kids out to school and get up that hillside when there's ice or snow. This again is the south side. Now this picture was taken sometime in the 1920s, showing you that the bank has always been there. And we have one other old picture. And there it is. It's a great neighborhood. Lots of people on our street have jacuzzis and really great kitchens and whatnot. We don't mind change at all. In fact, most of these houses sell as soon as they go on the market. There's some special circumstances other times. But anyway, we all love the neighborhood. We welcome the new neighbors, but we would like to keep things compatible so the neighborhood still hangs together. It's a wonderful, unspoiled local historic district, and we think the architecture speaks for itself, that we don't need a lot of embellishment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Pardon me. Would anyone else like to speak? Yes, please, sir, please come forward.
My name is Spence Millard. I live at 440 Fayette Park, and I'm kind of the unofficial historian of Fayette Park. I want to answer some questions. First of all, the restraining wall. I know the individual who built it, and he deliberately did not seek approval because he said sometimes it's easier to get forgiveness, to ask for forgiveness than to ask for approval for something. He did it without any sort of going before the board or anything along those ways, those ideas. Number two was regarding to the comment regarding the painted wall and building the Vaughn Alley wall. The Vaughn Alley wall was built out of cinder block by Homer Hale, and he built it just before Fayette Park was given its historic designation. And the individual who painted her wall, the yellow and orange thing, was to cover up the graffiti she had been painting on her wall, or something along those lines. But it was definitely not a nice act. And that individual who painted her wall, she's not a member of Fayette Park. Now, the idea that you might replace a view of 50 feet to a walnut as opposed to 20 feet to a Japanese maple is very fine. What Ilsa Newberry is talking about is instead replacing a view looking out the backyards both to her west and her east. and replacing it with a view that you can get in many great places like Chicago or New York City, namely looking out your window to see a wall looking back at you. That is her complaint about the addition, the two-story addition. As it stands right now, when she looks out her kitchen, and that's what she showed you with her photographs, she can see all the way, and she called that green space. You could call it viewscape. I don't care what you call it. It is trees, it's grass, you know, the tall green things and the short green stuff. Fayette Park started in 1889. It was a development, and one of the parts of the development was a covenant in the deeds for anybody who purchased one of the lots there. It specified that your house had to be back from the street. It had to specify what the materials had to be and the minimal cost, which I believe was $4,000. Another specification was that you could not have outdoor privies or livestock in your backyard. So anybody moving into what became Fayette Park already was subjected to rules that other areas did not have. So it is a tradition, and this enclosing your entire home and the yard in with a brick wall with a gate now. How medieval! It's definitely not Fayette Park. It has never been done before. Having the carriage porch, I don't know that that house ever had one. The one I do know that has always had one was Mrs. Meeker's house at 417. It's beautiful, but I am against these changes for those reasons, and I hope that the board will take that into consideration. Thank you.
Sir, thank you very much. Would anyone else in the audience like to speak to this case this evening? Thank you very much. We'll pass this around to the board and then give it to staff to make sure it's entered into the record. Would anyone else like to speak to this case this evening? Before we get back to the board to see if the board has any more comments, Ms. Pettigo, did you have an opportunity to consult with the applicant, the owner?
He's in agreement to maybe continue the discussion of the scale and working with the addition and the garages. I think what we're seeing is a lot of fear out of the actual view of the heights of these things in comparison to the structures that are existing there. Maybe what needs to happen is we need to try to get pictures, photos of, the aerial photos of showing how this really up close affects the two people on either side, as well as getting rear elevations so that we could maybe superimpose what this for the neighborhood. I'm here to try to get things accomplished for my client and not make myself an evil person in regard to the Fayette Park people, because I got to live too. So that's not our goal. I want to calm the fears of the Neighborhood Association Fayette Park. I do a lot of historic preservation and restoration projects. So I'm for creating new environments in the correct manner.
Is it possible for the next meeting that you put together some accurate renderings of the massing that might show more than two-dimensional? I mean, you mentioned it briefly, but if we could get something together that accurately depicts the massing in more of a three-dimensional nature to convey...
We can get a 3D image done.
That I think a series of those would help your case and help further inform the neighbors just what it is that's being proposed.
Mr. Billings?
The way I look at this is there are, I think this comes down to 5 issues. The surrounding wall and gate, the renovations, which there doesn't seem to be any question or dispute over. It's because the board's recommended approval for the renovations, as outlined in Ms. Kerr's proposal. The issue of 2 garages, the issue of the addition, and the issue of the retaining wall. So that's a whole lot of stuff to deal with. And each one of those has many issues. let me ask, the very first question I have is, who owns the property where the current garage is?
We have put the garage within the proper property. We've taken it out of where it was.
This is an L-shaped lot?
It is.
Okay, that's what I wanted, because it looked like it
Yeah,
was... it
we are no
crossed.
longer on any other property.
Okay. That was my first question is, I want to make sure that the right person owning the lot was
No,
applying.
we made
before
sure of
began
that.
working on
That was the first thing we did.
With respect to the renovation, I'm in favor if you all want to go forward on that. If you all would want to seek approval of that, I don't know if you want to wait on everything or if you're inclined to want part of that. I don't know what the board thinks or what staff thinks of that. But I don't know if you want to begin working on the project so that you could begin doing some of that stuff, or you just want to wait all at once. I'm just sort of talking right now.
It would be nice to be able to, if we're going to demo the porch, be able to demo the porch and demo the garage that's not on his property partially right now. So that would be nice to be able to do, at least move forward.
And was that also include, like, you want to go ahead and, would you do the re-roofing, replacing the copper roofing, or turning the roof pitch? Would you already begin doing those things, or would you wait?
We would like to start doing things at the site as soon as possible.
I think staff would suggest that, short of re-roofing the main mass of total, second floor big roof.
Sure.
That the other elements of the renovation of the building could be acted on by the board if that is your interest. And that would include the porch roof and the demolitions, the two demolitions. Now, the screen porch, if it's removed from the back of the house, obviously you're going to have to secure whatever openings and, happens with that sort of thing, which you'd need to inform staff a bit about how you're going to handle that before it would start. But I think those elements under the umbrella of renovation of the existing structure could proceed if that is the board's wish. Obviously, re-roofing the main mass
Sort of
might
needs to
not
wait
make
till-
sense relative to...
Well, it's what I'm trying to be as accommodating as possible. It sounds like we have a lot more questions that we're going to either come back in 2 weeks or whenever you
Right.
all are ready to do that. And I want to be as accommodating as possible so you can begin doing the things that the staff has approved that you all want to do, and that, at least I don't have a problem with. That's what I'm trying to get to, essentially. And so as long as I guess there's always a risk that you could demolish a porch and there not be a porch approved. That could be a risk taken. But that would be the applicant's risk to take. Okay. That's all I have from
Well, it seems to me like, the brick wall is the same height as the one on the neighbor's property side yard, okay? And that's been basically approved by staff, or, they recommended approval of the fence. And the garage is with some discussion about scale and dormers. So I'm not worried about putting the garages in. I think what we need to try to do is calm the neighbors by seeing the actual 3D of how, it's a huge yard still, the green space in the wall and the garages. But the addition, I agree, needs some work on scale, and that's fine.
Let me be more specific. I want continued information to discuss the retaining wall, the addition, and both the garages. I'm not sure that the historic use of the property supports two additional structures of the mass on the backside of the property than what's being requested at this point. And so I don't want.
Right.
I'm not making a vote right now. I'm just trying to tell you sort of what my thoughts are, that two doesn't seem to be within the confines of the guidelines as I'm seeing what's being submitted right now.
Well, approval of the two garages, correct me if I'm wrong, but that they wanted to work on the pictures of the roofs and et cetera.
Yeah, but that's what their recommendation is, and as this board member, I get to look at the guidelines and say, I don't believe that's consistent with the guidelines.
And the other thing, too, we did go to building inspection to make sure that we were within the guidelines of their jurisdiction of the amount of buildings per green space and et cetera.
And that's what building inspection approves. One, we either assume or at least I do, assume everything comes to me will be approved by building inspection. If it doesn't, it has to come back to us anyway. I'm not.
I was just trying to cover my tracks.
I know. Go ahead.
Please.
I would like to have you caution your client that it's nice that there's concern about the neighbors, and that should be a concern, being that it's a neighborly neighborhood. But we are concerned with meeting the guidelines.
Right.
And that's what it's going to take to get approval.
Right.
Okay.
Josh, feel anything?
I have no additional comments.
Board member Rob Magrish is not able to be here today, but he sent me an email comment, although he won't be here to vote on anything, but he wanted me to read his comments into the record, that he says that the project on Fayette Park is a bit dicey. I don't think the architectural design for the addition has much integrity and is way too big for the existing house and the site. I totally agree with staff on its findings and recommendations. And it should be here the next meeting.
Procedurally, I guess I have a question. Are you entertaining a conceptual review or at the next meeting, or would you like us to table or continue our discussion until the next meeting?
I think we need to continue our discussion to the next meeting. I think that probably is the best way to handle this. I mean, I'm going to come back with more information, or I don't know. What's the best way? What's the best thing from my view? I mean,
Mr. Chair, we might want to make sure that the applicant understands what a conceptual review is.
I will. Yeah, that is. You do understand what I mean?
So go on, tell me what.
Okay, a conceptual review is procedurally. My question is: would the applicant have to withdraw the application that's before us, or do we just not consider it while the conceptual review takes place and continue it to a meeting after the conceptual review? And I'll get to a definition of the conceptual review in 2 seconds.
A couple of things. If the board has an interest in acting on any part of the application today, say, just for example, about renovation issues of existing, obviously tabling or withdrawing the whole application would not be the method. Portions of an application can be withdrawn at an applicant's request. There's no penalty to an applicant for withdrawing, in the sense of you would be able to come back with even the identical application in the future. The withdrawal does not penalize you in any way, as in this couldn't be further discussed. Tabling it would, as in continue it, would allow for you to kind of pick up where you've left off. There would be the opportunity to submit additional material relative to what you've been hearing today, and whatever else the applicant would like to add to the submittal or revise, and so forth and so on. Now, that information would be necessary to be submitted by November the 3rd. I've been sitting here looking at the calendar. In order for it to be on the November 12th docket, because we'd have to send out the staff reports 5 days after that November 3rd. So there's not much turnaround time on anybody's end in terms of that. Be aware there's one meeting in November because of the Thanksgiving holiday, so there's not a second meeting in November. And also, that means your following meeting after November 12th will be December the 10th. So these are just kind of all parameters to be putting into your considerations. As far as a conceptual review, can you have both on the table at once, is what you're asking? Law? My own suggestion, and you can advise further with this, Mr. Wilson, but is that you could continue to have the application active, but also have a conceptual review, as in have informal discussion in the public forum that the public is known today to say it's going to be on this date, but that you would not take any action at that meeting, and would then necessitate any formal action being at a meeting yet to come.
Which the earliest would be the 10th of December 2008, which would require.
I'm sorry, WL and I were.
Oh, I said that if we're speaking hypothetically, that if we did have a conceptual at the next meeting, which is November 11th.
Right, 12th, yes.
12th, that the next actionable time would be the 10th of December.
Yes.
So the applicant would have to agree to an extension of the permit.
Right, because your current application, your deadline for the board to take action within the ordinance is November 24th. Now, I think you've been involved with doing the extension thing before. This is not relative to all of the things for that big a deal.
Right.
If it were a conceptual review only at the next meeting, the November, whatever we said, 12th, we'd have a little more lead time for when we'd need the information you would provide back to the process. Maybe, you know, if we, let's see, the third, fourth, fifth, maybe around the 6th or something, it would, you know, because we wouldn't be formalizing with all the staff report documentation. We'd be doing a more informal issues to be considered during this informal discussion, that kind of thing. And then, of course, at the conceptual review, what would happen is not only the board and any interested parties, neighborhood people and so forth have an opportunity to comment. You, of course, as the applicant's representative and the applicant, staff would comment, but it would be more of a work session. Is that a fair interpretation?
Yes.
So it's really up to the applicant and the board where you'd like to go from here.
Can I ask you what day the 10th of December is?
It's Wednesday.
It's a Wednesday. We're always Wednesdays.
Oh, good.
Second Wednesday
I have
of
to
the
fly to
month.
Philly on Thursday. Okay.
Personally, I really think that with the amount of detail that I think the board has been expressing that we'd like to see and that the staff has expressed, and I think that it would be a much better project at the end if we did use the next meeting as a
I
conceptual
agree.
review.
This has taken a long time to get to this point. I've worked on this for quite a while, so.
Sure. Are there any other comments or questions? Yes, please.
Some comments on the presentation and the comments tonight from the public in review of the application materials. I want to give some of my thoughts about how the guidelines control the application as it stands today for the applicant's consideration, coming back for the conceptual review, and ultimately another public meeting in December where we might decide upon the actual application. I have severe issues about the retaining wall disrupting the historic nature of Fayette Park. A lot of those comments that were said here today echo what my views of it as far as the guidelines are concerned with respect to preserving the historical nature and structure of all green spaces. The addition, I believe, is to mass and scale for the footprint, especially when you extend that all the way to the proposed patio, which isn't in the application, but based upon the drawing submitted, that the footprint of the house extends almost 2/3 from the original size. And I was reminded of, I went to Montpelier in early September, and they have taken it back to the original footprint of the house. And when you look at what the DuPonts did in expanding it out, while beautiful, destroyed the historical nature of the property, and that having taken those additions down and back to the original footprint, it is amazing. And the design that I saw that reminded me of what I thought the DuPonts had done to Montpelier. I think the surrounding wall and gate needs additional consideration and discussion before. I'm not prepared to say yes or no tonight. I want to work through how it's going to affect the historical nature of the backyards of Fayette Park, which are, I think, of critical importance to this historical element for Lexington. The renovations we discussed and the garages, I think, especially it may fit within building code, but as far as allowing 2 additional structures with the square footage that we're talking about, one to be a guest house, I guess is what they said. I'm not sure what the other one would then be.
The other one's just a garage.
So, but it looks like it has a second floor for some reason.
Well, we can get rid of that.
So,
look.
but those are just my reflection at this point that I think I need to make public so that you can tell what I'm saying. The public knows that we've, pardon me, taken what they've said into serious consideration.
I always know when I come down here to do this, I come with my big bag of, my wish list, and then I know what I'm going to have to do it, pick and choose and negotiate, and that's fine. That's why we come down with the most.
Any other questions or comments? Well, I think certainly ready to entertain a motion.
You try to make one? All right. Mr. Chairman, with respect to case number 069-00431-G at 431 Fayette Park, I move that the board approve the staff recommendations with approval of the following as submitted. It's reflected on page number 9 of the submission by the staff. The renovation plans, including replacing the roof, raising the front porch roof, and the replacement of the metal roof with copper to the extent the applicant wants to do that. Demolition of the rear addition, and demolition of the west garage at this time, and that we table for conceptual review at the next board meeting the remaining elements of the application with a hearing on those for the December 10th meeting.
Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Billings. Is there a second to the motion?
I will second that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Sumner. Is there any discussion of the motion? Everything cool?
Everything's cool.
So no appearance on this case at the November meeting?
Oh, a conceptual.
We'll have conceptual
Okay, so
review.
what we can do is announce that in a minute here. We don't legally need to do so, but I think practically we need to also include that this case will be discussed.
I will accept the amendment that we should put that in at the end of this case and in the minutes, and to give public notice of that
Okay.
review, because it has such importance to the neighborhood and to the
Right.
park.
That it will be reviewed as a conceptual review with no action taken, but everybody have an opportunity to comment at the November 12th
Yes,
meeting.
thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Sumner, do you accept that amendment?
Yes, I second that.
Thank you. Any more discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Before this gets lost in my stack.
Okay.
I have that original back, the big one.
Okay, we've got.
The next case this evening is in the Mulberry Hill Historic District at 400 North Limestone. It's to replace the structure's windows and storefront system. Is that applicant present?
Good evening. I'm John DeHart with Thought Space Architects, here representing the owner for 400 North Limestone.
Thank you. Have you had an opportunity to read the staff's findings and recommendations?
I have.
Are you in agreement with them?
No, I'm not.
I think for all of our education, to make sure we're all up to speed on this project, it would be appropriate for the staff to present their presentation to us, and we'll be back with you in just a moment.
You guys always make me go last just because you're expecting me to buy dinner at some point, right? That's what it is.
As is mine.
I'm ready. Randy? This is the project 400 North Limestone. The applicant has requested to replace the structure's windows and the storefront system. Thank you. New owner of this property has already received a staff-issued COA to renovate the structure, and that work has already begun. At this time, the applicant is requesting the board grant a COA to replace all the existing double-hung windows of the two-story portion of the structure with new all-wood double-hung windows having the same Muntin profile as the existing windows, and to replace the existing glass block windows of the two-story portion of the structure with a single light fixed wood window that fits the opening, and to replace the composite wood and metal storefront system of the first floor commercial structure space with an aluminum door and window system. Reference the style of the existing double-hung windows, only 4 are of the 1/1 design, and these occur on the front elevation. Randy, if we could Could we see the front of the drawings? Okay. Except for a single 6/1 window on the north elevation, all the remaining windows are 2/2 design. For continuity, the 6/1 window would be replaced with the 2/2 design window. The proposed all-wood replacement windows are to be as manufactured by Hurd Windows and Doors. Glazing is to be simulated true light with the wood muntins attached to both sides of the insulated glass, which has a spacer in the air space. The existing window openings, which are currently shuttered closed, are to remain closed, and the shutters being repaired as needed. The proposed aluminum storefront system is to be as manufactured by YKK Corp. of America. The frame system has a 2-inch face dimension, 4.5-inch depth. The full light entry door is to be of the narrow style. Glazing of the system is to be with 1-inch thick insulation glass. Staff finds that has inspected the condition of double-hung windows in this circa 1890 late Italianate style structure and has determined that rehab of the existing windows would not be feasible. Therefore, replacement would be appropriate in accordance with the guidelines. However, the replacement of the existing true divided light windows with a Hurd window and door system having simulated true light glazing is not within the guidelines. Guidelines 22.4 state replacement windows are only recommended when historic windows cannot be rehabbed. If the use of historic windows is permitted by the board, replacement windows should match the historic windows in size, style, and material and have the same number of panes, have had muntins, rails, and frames of the same dimensions. The proposed window sashes for the 2/2 design windows consisting of a single pane of insulated glass that has metal spacer bars inside the glass and muntin-style wooden strips fused to the outside surfaces does not meet the intent of the guidelines. The replacement of a true divided wood light system with a simulated true light system is found to be inappropriate. Guideline 29.2, 4, and 30-3 respectfully state, when repairing or replacing deteriorated ornamental or details, new details should match as closely as possible the historic details. Replacement details shall match historic details in size, shape, material, color, texture, and other visual qualities. A replacement and repair materials, when permitted, should match historic materials in size, shape, color, texture, and other qualities, visual qualities. The storefront of the first floor commercial space at the corner of 4th and Limestone has lost virtually all detailing of its circa 1890 Italianate style by the time of the July 1980 historic survey photo, which is attached. Which the survey stated plain modern display windows on the front flanking entrance and partly along 4th Street. The storefront needs to be upgraded for additional strength and safety. Since there are no known photographs as to the design of the original storefront, the proposed simple and crystalline 2-inch wide aluminum frame section and narrow style full light doors as proposed is found to be appropriate in accordance with guidelines. Guidelines 25.4 states, replacement of storefront windows should be compatible in style and appropriate to the building on which they are installed. Recommendation: staff recommends disapproval of the 2/2 design simulated true light window design and staff recommends approval as submitted of the fixed wood windows and the 1/1 design wood windows to the aluminum storefront door and window system. The applicant is here.
Thank you, Mr. Ginocchio. Mr. DeHart, if you'd like to come back forward. I'd like to thank you this evening for your patience.
Really, there's only just the one issue, and that's the 2/2 window design. I think it all comes down to this issue of simulated true lights as opposed to a real divided true light. It's my feeling, and coming against the same issue in years past, that original part of the ordinance was written for some of the sort of cheap plastic muttons that were applied to the glass on the inside and the outside and were very obvious, poorly done kind of windows. It didn't refer to some of the new modern windows. And in fact, 3 years ago, we submitted Pella windows for the historic residence next door at 404 North Limestone with a letter from the Department of the Interior saying that these were the exact windows that Washington was using for all of their historic renovations. And the board approved the divided light at that point. I have a sample that I'll bring up here for you guys. Given the interest today in energy efficiency, and these windows are really state-of-the-art pieces of the building envelope, a true divided light fixed plane window has many thermal bridges, so it doesn't provide nearly insulative value. So most manufacturers now do not make a true divided light because they can't get the energy efficiency they need out of true divided lights. So most of them have gone to this simulated where they apply the bar to the outside and the inside, and they also provide bars in the middle. So just to look at it from any kind of distance away, when the window's installed, you cannot tell that it's not, but you get all of the energy efficiency of having one pane of glass, basically, within there.
Let me interrupt for a second. Because I'm the attorney here, I have no idea what two of these things are. What's a mutt? I mean, what? Oh, so it's the wood piece that goes across and divides the window? Okay, that explains a whole lot. Number two.
This is a corner of the window.
Right.
This is the sash.
Yeah, I understand. I know what the sash is.
So these are the muttons. These are the divider bars.
Okay. That's
Often you'll hear those referred to as a mullion.
All right.
Incorrect term. It is a muntin.
Because mutton, where I come from in Eastern Kentucky, is what you eat on good Sunday dinners or something. But
So this is the issue, is what is this piece in the middle?
between the exterior woods? Okay.
Would you grab that mic? The benefit of these. Would you grab the mic? Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you, Martin.
I appreciate you taking the time to educate me about something I don't know a whole lot about.
So, I think and they still manufacture them. You can go to Lowe's and buy windows that have just cheap plastic muttons that are adhered to this, or not even not adhered. So when you close the door, the muttons kind of rattle. These are not that kind of things. These are fairly expensive windows. This is not a cheap alternative. This is actually a state-of-the-art, nice alternative for windows, historic replacement. So they're wood muttons that are applied to the glass, and then we have a divider so that visually, this is doing nothing other than visually providing that look so that someone to walk up off the street cannot tell that it's not a true divided light window. Again, I think that portion of the ordinance is antiquated. I think there have been some discussions about a change to that section to allow some of these new technology of these kind of windows. It has been approved in the past, just on the neighboring building. Staff approved it for us 3 years ago. Those were Pella windows. Not staff. Staff did not approve it at that time. Board did approve it at that time. Those were Pella's, very, very similar windows to these Hurd windows.
And the true divided light is just where the single pane is actually where the wood muttons are?
They go all the way through.
If there's actually single panes between each mutton, not a single pane with the grid systems on the exteriors.
Then has whether 8 pieces of glass or however many set
the grid
within
set.
the wood elements. That's correct. So that they are
Thanks for helping educate me.
dimensional. Oh, listen, we can give you the full tour sometime. We'll go out and go down the street and talk about windows.
The big issue with it in today's world is just thermal efficiency. And these provide thermal breaks, so these windows provide much better thermal barrier than true divided light windows do. And so if it comes down to the aesthetics, I think the manufacturers realized there were issues in historic districts, so that's why they modified their design to include the spacers on the inside so that they would have the same kind of aesthetic value. It's very hard to tell the difference. You have to be a window expert to tell the difference between it when it's a true divided as opposed to that.
I have a question. I have a question of staff. Is there any question about the 1/1 or 2/2, the design that's submitted outside of the construction of the window? Is there any? Okay. So the configuration of the sash and the muntins are acceptable. Right now, the question is the product. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
In terms of achieving the right profiles and having it dimensionally read.
It was really common on buildings of this vintage that the windows facing the street were bigger pieces of glass. So that was sort of seen as a little showy or ostentatious because glass was more expensive, big sheets of glass. So a lot of the street elevations have, bigger pieces of glass. So they would be 1/1 or less divisions. And then when they got to the side streets, they would become more divisions because they were cheaper.
They're also representative of architectural eras and styles, the different rhythm of how, 1/1s, 2/2s, multiple panes. They're tied to, Federal, Greek Revival, Italianate, Victorian, et cetera, et cetera.
I have, this is a conflicting issue for me as an architect. I often have these same troubles. I have gotten similar windows. I'm not familiar with Hurd brand. I have gotten similar windows approved by the Heritage Council in renovations in historic districts commercially in other parts of the state. And it takes much work and much dedication to find the right profile. Having not analyzed the profile of the muntin, I have to take staff's word that this is not an appropriate profile at this moment.
Well, is that what staff's objection is? Not true divided light, not that there's a question of profile, correct?
Both. I mean, one of the reasons that true divided light are called for by the guidelines is to accomplish suitable profiles. And these are kind of flat.
They're kind of flimsy and thin looking.
They're not dimensional enough.
Right.
And that's one of the challenges of the grid on either side, kind of business. One of the things you mentioned about the design guidelines update talking about this, one of the major things talked about was if you're going to look at alternate ways to accomplish things, being sure those profiles are right. So under the current guidelines, it's very clearly stated that the true divided light is what's to be sought, and that would include the profile be correct in a true divided light as well. I mean, you could build a true divided light that still didn't meet the profile if you didn't think about it. But the profile is usually the biggest problem on this, plus the manner in which the filler bar is handled. You can walk down a street, and if you can understand that they're not true, that's not meeting the intent of our guidelines.
Some manufacturers will make a filler bar that truly touches each glass. I think Pella does that.
Yeah, and even
as opposed to this one that's kind of floats in there.
Pella is still doing that at the moment. This is a step beyond, and Pella's discussions at the moment, as well as all the manufacturers are going to float the filler because otherwise they're providing a thermal bridge.
Thermal break.
So they're all going to, in the future, the manufacturers are moving to a floating internal frame. I think I can still get Pella's. I just like this window better. So I guess if it were an option that this just was going to be denied entirely, my fallback would be the same window that we put in the residence next door, which was the Pella historic window, the all-wood window. But it still had a filler panel.
Well, I believe that guidelines should reflect modern manufacturing capabilities. I think that a good I'm sorry, I guess I'm tired. I'm losing my words. The manufacturing process of windows these days has come so far along. We don't have to do single sheets of glass and have no thermal quality at all. So I don't have a problem with the concept of a window like this, but I would like to see, and I don't know how much research you've done, but I can think of a couple of other alternatives that might help us with the profile of the Muntin. Still allowing, my opinion is, I would still be in favor of a window constructed like this, but the Muntin profile just isn't going to get it done with this particular window for me with this. And in fact, on another note, you know, I'm not really that enthused about the aluminum storefront either. I really think it detracts from the property, but since there was no record of what it might have been, and we have to reflect upon what was put in 80, or, I think that's kind of a shame to have that storefront look like that.
Well, I mean, we can't be asked either to try and replicate something that was there 100 years ago. I mean, we can't be asked to go back in time and try and copy something.
It's just my commentary. I haven't cast a vote yet. Just commentary.
Yeah.
Just about the whole overall look of the project. Yeah.
Mr. Hosfield?
I agree to some extent that, this window has better capabilities to perform than a divided light, a true divided light window would have, and that you would be better served. But I have to also agree that the profile of the Muntin should be reviewed by staff. I would almost hope that our final recommendation include approval of such a window with the final Muntin profile to be approved by staff. Is something to consider. I'm not making that motion at the moment, but is my only comment at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Billings?
Mr. DeHart, with respect to the windows, is there any dispute over the windows themselves to be replaced with 2x2 or 1x1? I was a little unclear from the staff report as to which windows are going to be replaced with what.
Right.
My
Well,
understanding
it's a
was
mixed, the existing scenario is a mixed bag.
Yeah, I know. And my understanding is that there were 4 1x1s on the front with 2 over the storefront, 2 small veneer ones over the side entrance, and then there was 2 2x2s up and down on the front elevation, and then on the side there's a 6x1. My understanding of reading this is that you wanted to make everything 2x2. But I'm
No,
not sure
that's not true. No,
That's,
we want.
that's what I wanted to ask, because I'm not
There's
sure.
only 2. We want to replace everything with the same exact pattern, except for 2 instances. That is one that's a 6/1 that appears to have been the sash was rebuilt and is not original,
Okay.
and a glass block infill.
And the staff agrees with that interpretation.
With both of them? Okay, so
Go ahead.
staff doesn't have any problem with changing those 2 windows to 2x2s.
Yeah, I think the only issue is the profile of this
Okay.
window for the divided light ones.
Okay, that's what wasn't clear because it's...
Configuration, we're all in agreement on.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you're correct about the multitudinous designs, but we are in agreement, but the staff and the applicant, about the proper design solutions. It's, again, the manner in which it's accomplished.
Okay. What was, you said it was 2 years ago you came and approved this other window?
It was probably 3 years ago, and it was a different manufacturer. It was a Pella, not a Hurd window. So the profile could be different. It could be slightly different. I'm not familiar. I don't think I still have a sample of the Pella.
For context of continuity, you all had, the staff had disapproved.
The staff had recommended
recommended
disapproval of that method of solution, and the board, after hearing the case and seeing, I think they actually saw a sample, if
Yeah, we brought a sample in.
remember correctly, granted the Pella, in that instance, Pella brand window. So it was, again, the staff recommended one direction, and the board's solution was different from that.
Do you remember what the letter said from the U.S. Department of Secretary of Interior?
Relative to...
Use of the window?
It just said that Pella window was currently being used by the Department of Interior, that specific unit.
Okay.
And again, I think, correct me if I'm
But
wrong.
not in every situation. I mean, they're not telling you it's blanketly put.
Right, no, I'm not. I'm just saying they're using it.
My understanding is that they were, is my understanding correct that the letter said that this is a window that we are using in certain renovations of historical properties that we believe satisfies certain conditions? Would that be fair?
I would suspect that's close.
I don't know.
to what their intent was. I don't remember the letter. It's probably in our file. I dare say you all submitted it to the record at the time. But part of it always depends on what the situation is that they're working with, and you know to know that, so.
Yeah, see, I guess I thought the objection was still the true divided light versus this. If it's an issue of profile, then, because I just have an issue with true divided lights from a thermal issue, from a energy efficiency
I'm just suggesting to you that as one voting board member, I would consider a window fabricated in modern method, but the profile needs to be in compliance with what we want to see with the historic structure.
All right, so maybe that Pella was
And
more
that's
in
just
compliance.
one person's opinion in this room.
I'd also like to, I guess, raise a couple of those. We're not by any means, as a board, condoning any particular brand of product.
Oh, it sounds like you are, Derek.
No. We're talking all generic, just general manufacturing, and whatever the market might provide. I certainly have no idea about, nor could I recommend any particular brands. That said, I'm in agreement with Sumner. I believe that there's a I was on the board when the previous windows were approved, and again, need to reiterate that the staff did not recommend approval on the board based on the evidence in that particular case at the time. Did approve the windows, and I think that the devil is in the details. And again, I think if there's more of a profile, more relief, more detailing in the profile in this particular instance, that would certainly, again, in my opinion, be more appropriate. If I recall correctly, another issue that we discussed in the previous case, which I think is also relevant here, is the actual coloring of the interior spacer. I believe the other spacers were black, and which are easier to read as a shadow as you're away from the window and approaching it and passing it. And I think that's an important thing. I don't know if which particular manufacturers offer colorings on the spacers, but I think that would be something that I would be. I think that would help the application of a simulated true divided light, which is certainly a mouthful of words in this particular case. I think another, as you pointed out, there's some manufacturers where the button is not integral to the window, and I think that's also an important feature, that it cannot be removed. There's some other manufacturers who have the spacer. There is nothing applied to the exterior of the glass, and it's physically sandwiched in between the. And I know that's not something that you've considered, but I did want to bring it up for Mr. Billings' benefit, that there's there is a wide range of products that try to accomplish the same thing. It's just how it's done. And again, I think that more profile, and if the internal spacers are a dark color, so as to read more of a shadow, would be very, very beneficial.
Okay.
Could staff make one comment about the storefront, actually, not
Certainly.
on the windows? As Mr. Ginocchio noted, but perhaps add one further thought, continuing his thought in the report, one of the reasons the aluminum is allowable within the guidelines in this situation is the existing condition, not condition in the deteriorated sense, but the existing fabric that is in place. It is a strange metal system, and very kind of flimsy, I guess would be the word for it. But it opens the door procedurally to an aluminum or alternate metal being considered. If it had wood element storefront, even altered or, not so old even, it would have opened the door to the process being able to steer, in terms of recommendations at least, toward wood. However, this is sort of in the grandfathered in concept. The change has already occurred. introducing that concept. So an aluminum is allowable within the guidelines, at least in the staff's interpretation in this instance.
Does anyone in the audience wish to speak to this case? Does anyone on the board have any other comments or questions for the applicant?
Perhaps it is my own ignorance of this, but I've read guideline 22.4 and 29.2, 29-4, and 30-3, and with respect to 22-4, it says that replacement windows are only recommended when historic windows cannot be rehabilitated. That issue, that guideline is not in dispute. That seems they can't be rehabilitated. Everyone agrees on. It says then replacement windows should match the historic window in size, style, and materials. Have the same number of panes, muntins, rails, and frames of the same dimensions. And then goes on to talk about when repairing or replacing ornament or details, new details should match as closely as possible historic details, including size, shape, material, which reflects the same thing as 22.4, color, texture, which I don't think are in dispute, and other visual qualities. And that's also repeated in 30-3. I don't know that I can tell a difference from what the guidelines say from what I think I understand about what the old wood windows are versus what you've proposed here today. Perhaps what the word style to me is just would have a different definition, to me than what someone else. But I don't know that a common walker-by would ever be able to tell the difference. I'm certainly not an expert or an architect. I can't tell the difference. But I'm not able to distinguish the style between what you're proposing and what I have explained to me is that the muntins would be solid wood with four technical separate pieces of glass than what you're proposing with just a single piece of glass with exterior wood strips adhered to the outsides with interior metal strips to prevent, visual penetration through those exterior wood strips. I'm not able to tell that difference from what you proposed here today, so I think it's meet the guidelines. I think this is a gray area because I don't think the guidelines speak clearly to exactly what it's talking about, but I don't know if the new ones are going to address it or not, but they're not here today yet.
One thing you would see is that this would be glazed and compound here to hold the window in. So it would be probably just a flat surface across there like that.
Which are usually, the glaze is usually painted over. But I understand it may not look the exact same as wood is what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Material-wise. And this would all be wood back through here. And this
the muntin would be a solid piece, yeah.
Inside and out.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, certainly entertain a motion.
In reference to case number 11660400F 400 North Limestone property, I would make a motion that the aluminum storefront door and window replacement system be approved as staff recommended. However, the replacement of wood windows, I would like for staff to have further review over that to approve the proper profile of muntin.
Is there a second to the motion?
I might also staff also recommended the one by one.
I know.
Okay.
Well, comment to that, Mr. Billings was questioning the motion whether it included the fixed wood window or not with the staff approval. It seems to me like the wood windows might, I'll leave that up to the designer. It seems like they would want to match. So I was trying to allow them to proceed with aluminum work, holding out on wood window design. That was my thinking on the motion.
Is there a second to the motion?
I second the motion.
Any discussion on the motion? I think that's entirely appropriate. I think that this is a design detail that the applicant can work with staff on. If staff has a question about it, they can always refer it back to us.
So for clarification, the board is approving a simulated divided light,
We haven't voted yet.
if indeed this motion were to be approved. Your intent is that it be a simulated divided light system, and the staff would work out the details of the profiles and the spacer bars as to how successful that is relative to meeting the intent of profile.
That was my understanding, and I neglected to, I'm afraid, to ask you for findings so to support the acceptance of the simulated true divided light.
I'm just not sure the guidelines really address that specific modern method of construction of a window. If I'm wrong, someone can indicate the guideline to me.
I would also suggest maybe that Mr. Billings' discussion about the style, size, materials, number of panes, having the same dimensions would be applicable here. That I don't want to put words in your mouth. That you believe that the proposal does meet the intent and does meet those guidelines, referencing guidelines 22.4, 29.2, 29.4, and 33.
I'm sorry, what was your question?
No, no question.
Okay.
I was just helping you.
Yes.
With some findings.
Yes, thank you.
Any more discussion of the motion? Okay. All those in...
I do.
Yeah, sure.
Just to be clear, you're absolutely right. And answer kind of to your question is, I'm not going to do the 1/1s and 2/2s because I want to use the same manufacturer, so everything's exactly right.
Yes.
And number two, my understanding is if this vote passes, then I'm approved for this concept, working out details at staff level. So I don't have to come back before the board, correct? If it's approved.
Unless they put it back before us for consideration.
Unless there's
So I have to buy her dinner, right? That's the only...
conceivably, most items could be handled by staff. If there was something that prevented staff from following the direction of the board, they would certainly bring it back to us. But in most cases, staff would be able to handle that detail working out.
Gotcha.
I think it's designed to try to empower the staff and you to find a solution without having to wait 3.5 hours for a hearing.
That'd be great.
Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
It's 3-1, and a motion does carry. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for your patience. I believe we have one other case that we delayed discussion of. It's 416, 418 South Mill Street, renovate structure and site. Certainly entertain a motion at this point.
Mr. Chair, with respect to case number 13150416-B, 416, 418 South Mill Street, I recommend that the board approve the recommendations as submitted by the staff with the conditions outlined in the staff report, being one, final details of the brick stoop and steps, including railings, be submitted to staff for review and approval before purchase of materials for work, and two, gate of a replacement fence be no wider than 4 foot, masonry piers be no larger than 16-inch square, and the front plane of the piers not extend closer to the street than the front plane of the main structure.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Sumner. Any discussion on the motion?
I would like to ask the question. Since the deadline for board action is November 24th, and we do meet before that date, with regard to the second staff recommendation, would we be able to set this aside for a later date so that the owner might speak to this point?
That's certainly one option open to the board.
I would also, I think that if the owner had a concern regarding the conditions set forth by the board, they could always come back to talk to us about it. I don't think that'd be any violation of their of the hearing, rehearing a case or anything like that.
Would be a waiver, wouldn't
Kind of depends what you get into. If they come and want you to, say, negate the second condition, then you'd have to find new evidence to open the case. If they want to amend that, then they probably could come back because they would be holding a permit for X and they'd want to amend it to Y.
And, well, I don't want to open up the Pandora's box, but I guess conceivably, if they want to remove the condition, they could always appeal our decision as well.
Think of the hours. That is technically correct.
Is this Bill Lear's daughter's property?
Let me see who owns it.
Yes.
I believe that is.
I'm not worried that they'll appeal it if we mess it up somehow.
I don't think, this is just my opinion, I don't think that the conditions set forth will be a problem.
They don't seem extreme.
I like to think that you're right.
They got
but I can't.
they had the
They chose
report.
not to be here, right?
The case was emailed to them on Monday.
So they've seen the staff recommendations.
Oh, yes.
So I would,
And I know that Amelia has met on site with them about a number of things about their project. I don't know any details about all that they've weighed while standing out there as far as issues and so forth, but I know they're in touch a good bit. So that's all I can tell you.
I'm going to assume that since the owner is not present, they're in agreement with staff recommendations.
I'd be in agreement with that.
Any more discussion?
No.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
So 3-1, and motion carries. Other business this evening. Whoa, I got ahead of myself. Regarding case number 9 at 633 West Short Street, change roof material. The applicant has requested postponement until 11 November 2008. Certainly entertain a motion to that effect.
So moved.
There's a second.
I second.
Thank you. Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Would you mind? I want to be sure we're increasing the 10th. Normally, when Kathy's with us, she's got all of this charts.
The second Wednesday of November is November 12th.
Okay. I do believe it.
December 10th.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
November 12th, so we need to change that last motion, please.
Yes.
Mr. Billings, accept the amendment?
I'll accept it.
You accept the second? Second, would you accept the amendment?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excellent. Well, we've already passed the motion, so I guess it's all good.
Approval by acclamation.
Yes, acclamation, there we go. Case number 10, 620 West Short Street, changed fence lines, paved parking area. Applicant has requested postponement until 12 November 2008. Motion to that effect, please.
Wait, are you on Short Street?
Mm-hmm.
620?
Yeah. See above, was that referencing a postponement?
We did that at staff. I'm sorry. The reason it says see above is that was determined to be something could be handled at staff and their permit was issued.
Okay.
Strike that, then. Pardon me. Other business, we have minutes from the 24 September 2008 public hearing and the 8 October 2008 public hearing. Did anyone see any deficiencies in either of those?
Just subject to I know normally staff does a final review and submission of the minutes once they approve for grammar, typos, and stuff. Other than that, I didn't see it.
Certainly entertain a motion to accept each one of those, please.
I was only present at October 8th, so I can't speak to the 24th.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we accept the September 24th and October 8th meeting minutes as submitted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hosfield. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. Any discussion of the motion? Pardon me. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Billings, did you want to bring your item up now, or did you want me to go on to my next?
No, I can do that. I would like to have the board, I don't think we have the authority to direct it under the bylaws, but I'd like to move the board recommend to the staff that you all provided a really good set of materials for board members that I know I use in preparing for all the hearings. There are only a couple of those things that are on the website available to the public. I know that you all are in the process of doing that, but I'd like as a board to encourage you all to put those on there. All the materials that you all submitted to us, which are items 1 through 12, the Article 13 section that's exempted out of the overall ordinance, the bylaws for the BOAR, the meeting schedule member is already on there. Staff review items, I think, are already on there. I think the design guidelines are already on there. The guidebook, I can't remember, the H1 zoning information, the historic preservation bylaws, the member list of that, and then the other 3 things regarding local historic properties and National Register of Historic Properties for the public's ease of access and use to be placed in there. And then if the new guidelines, when I know there's a meeting coming up, which I know you have in a minute, that they will be put in a text searchable PDF format so that instead of having to sort of scroll through there to make it user-friendly for the average person.
Thank you, Mr. Billings. The other thing that's not really an actionable item, I just would like to make an announcement. There is a public hearing for the review of the proposed guideline revisions, which will be at the Lexington Public Library in Meeting Room A.
The meeting room in the lower level?
Yeah, in the basement. On the 29th of October, 2008, which is a Wednesday at 7 p.m. And
5 p.m.
5 p.m. I'm sorry, I had it in my memory wrong. And sort of like to make the public aware of that, and certainly encourage anyone and everyone to attend. I've been part of the process of getting the guidelines reviewed and updated, and I think that they've been illustrated and annotated, and I think that this new document will go to great lengths to not only incorporate new building materials, but further encourage appropriate contemporary design in our neighborhoods, plus make a very user-friendly document for the residents of historic districts. And that's all I have, and certainly entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all very much.